List skipped a flat stone across the surface of the lake, watching it hop once, twice, and vanish beneath the ripples. In his other hand, he discreetly pocketed something small and precious from the bottom of a wooden box. A trinket by size, but its theft was tantamount to slaying Diaz's kin. He knew what would follow. Diaz would inevitably bring blood to Hay Fan's doorstep. "I haven't seen his face," Swan murmured behind him, "and neither has anyone else in the Thieves' Guild. He commands us only through letters, cryptic, deliberate, never signed by his real name. Diaz might be anyone. A faceless farmer in a remote village, a shadow seated within the palace halls, or even a ghost who never truly lived." Swan, the green beast, recited it with calm conviction, his yellow eyes sharp with obsession. He had tried, more than once, to track the elusive Diaz, but always came up with nothing. No scent, no trail, just whispers. Under Diaz's leadership, the Thieves' Guild had evolved into something monstrous and supreme, the very peak of underground organization. Not built on brute strength or legendary names, but on something more enduring: structure, anonymity, and fear. There were no heroes, no renowned killers, not even ranks or uniforms. The guild's most capable blades had no names, only assignments. It was a machine, a parasite burrowed into the Western continent's veins. Its arteries were taverns and temples, noble estates and sewer tunnels. And its master was a name passed like rumor: Diaz. List had to admit, he admired the design, even if it repulsed him. Try to raise an army against the guild? You'd be punching smoke. Cut off a den or two. A flesh wound, nothing more. They strike from the shadows with weapons of air and silence. List muttered to himself. You won't even see them coming. Relax, Swan grunted, noting the tension in List's shoulders. You'll break if you're always this strung up. List glanced down at his left hand, fingers brushing the hilt of the Junlin sword. Every spell Fin cast cost gold dragons. Every artifact exacted a price. The sword's cost, however, remained unseen, its hunger buried beneath polished steel. As long as he didn't push its curse too far, he'd be fine, probably. By dusk, the skies turned crimson. The lake shimmered with the bloody light of the setting sun. Xiadi finally arrived, late as expected, with Claude and his ragtag company in tow. To maintain discretion, they had traveled on foot until the last town, where they bought over 20 horses. 15 golden dragons gone. Necessary expenses, List thought. Caruso and his party had already reached the region. They couldn't afford delays now. The Count knew where to tether the horses, and chose a spot beside a bed of lush alfalfa, high-quality forage by any standard. Nothing unusual during your journey? List asked immediately. No, Xiadi said, exhausted and sweating beneath her bamboo hat. But Claude badgered me the whole way. I had to explain things 10 times over. Claude, stripped of his steel armor, now wore only rough linen. His body, still thick with muscle, showed the wear of desperation. No longer a noble knight, just a man looking for survival. Speak, Captain. Whatever it is, say it now, Claude said grimly. Though he'd accepted List's 10 golden dragons, he still had questions. The man had spent all his money drowning in wine and despair. His men were down to their last coppers, gambling and drinking each night in the Menglon Hotel, and now looked more like outlaws than soldiers. But Claude had followed List here. Deep down, he still hoped there might be something worth clinging to. List knew the time for half-truths had passed. Claude had to know exactly what was coming, or he'd break at the worst moment. You ever hear how the Royal Navy ranks its officers in Baima? List asked suddenly. Claude frowned. What's that got to do with this? List smirked. Everything. The man we're working for, Chai de Guanren, is favored to become the new king of Baima. And if this job succeeds, we won't just be pirates. We'll be naval officers. I'm talking about an official ship. I'll be captain. And someone like you, you'd be an acting lieutenant. Not a noble yet, but with real power and close to a title. Claude looked shaken. It was like a recruiter offering a cushy executive position after years of slogging in exile. But it couldn't be that simple, could it? What's the job? Claude asked, voice low. List leaned closer, voice dropping. We're picking up someone. A high-profile fugitive, like you. Name's Carlo, a former high-ranking member of the Church of the Holy Spirit. He's protected by Gloria, an adventurer of no small renown. Once you meet them, you'll understand I'm not spinning tales. They're the real thing, and none of them have any reason to return to Aaron. Claude's hand rested near the hilt at his waist. So we're killing the Aarons next? List didn't flinch. Yes, and look around you. Where you go if you keep running? How long can you feed 20 mouths without steady work? If you pass on this, your next stop is either the gallows or an anonymous grave. He turned to the rest of Claude's men, raising his voice so they could all hear. This is the only path left. Do the job, make your fortune, and maybe, just maybe, go home and find robes with your name restored. Siadi muttered under her breath. List was overdoing it, promising titles and power like he was selling the afterlife. Still, even she had to admit, the speech worked. Claude glanced at the lake, then at the ragged soldiers behind him. Their eyes shone with something close to hope. He swallowed hard. Then, with a heavy breath, he drew his sword and drove it into the ground. List smiled. The crew they had on the ship was a ragtag band of mercenaries. After a few battles, they'd be worn to the bone. But with Claude and his men, BlackSail could finally expand properly. And now, Claude belonged to the ship. In Linden City, though Admiral Dalton had locked horns with the Aaron military police, he still maintained the formal courtesies required to host imperial guests. According to protocol, such guests should have been housed in the fortress castle. However, Dalton refused to risk gossip about the ongoing embargo. Instead, he paid from his own pocket to lodge them in the city's finest accommodations. Among them was the prestigious Menglon Hotel, where the delegation was settled into the top suite on the 12th floor. This entire arrangement was part of a high-profile manhunt. Under the banner of the Eternal Sect and the Aaron Military Police, a special inspection unit had been formed. A priest, several elite officers, and nearly 1,000 troops had crossed the continent from the Aaron border to the East Coast, all in pursuit of a single target. But only one man knew the identity of that target, Captain Zahak, the leader of the operation. Zahak stood alone on the balcony, surveying the bustling harbor of Linden City. Ships came and went in a graceful dance. Orange trees lined the waterfront, their citrus scent mixing with the sea breeze. It was a land of beauty, wasted in his eyes on the Duchy of Bima. He was a striking figure, white-haired, impeccably dressed in the spotless white and red uniform of the Aaron Military Police. His boots shone, his gloves were creaseless, and the coat on his shoulders fluttered like a banner of war. But most haunting of all was his sheathed sword, for which a faint mist of blood-colored vapor continually seeped. Sitting nearby on a velvet sofa was a tall YS woman with wolf-like ears and flowing blue hair. She wore the same uniform, though more casually, and was in the middle of polishing her nails while talking idly. I saw the most exquisite elf in the hotel lobby this morning, she sighed. Long ears like a dark elf, porcelain skin, lashes like snow, and eyes like roses. Utterly to die for. Zahak paid her no mind. He had no patience for distractions. Success in this mission would grant him a seat among the Emperor's elite Imperial Guard. It was a path reserved for legends, a direct appointment by the Emperor himself. Even someone like the fearsome Black Sword Mingyan would stand as an equal. Any word yet? Zahak asked, his voice sharp. A towering leopard man, standing nearly 2.5 meters tall, responded with a bored shrug. Once a famed arena champion, he now served as Zahak's second-in-command. They'll be here soon enough, he said. The dragnet was already in place. Zahak had bribed every minor noble along the coast. 2,000 gold dragons for anyone who reported a suspect vessel. For lords who barely owned half that in personal fortune, the reward was irresistible. Every port, town, and anchorage near Linden had been locked down. Troops patrolled the countryside. Priests combed hidden bays. Caruso and his companions were boxed in. Escape would be impossible. A young officer arrived with a fresh report. They were spotted yesterday at an near Luoquan town. Distance? Zahak snapped. 1,700 miles, give or take. They're still heading this way. Zahak stroked his chin. They're moving fast, 300 miles a day. If they plan to go to sea, it has to be from this coast. He turned to the map, jabbing his finger at it. Which towns are left on their path to Linden? The officer rattled off a list. Lavender Town was among them. Then why haven't we heard anything from there? We're right next door. He dispatched another officer to the town, frustrated. Then Zahak gave another order. Send a team to the admiral's residence. Inform him the emperor and commander personally signed the decree, total lockdown authority. We want permission to enter any residence, any property. He glanced at the leopard man. You go. The beast recoiled. Boss, you know they nearly called the musketeers last time I went. They'll shoot me if I show up again. Exactly. That's why you must go. They need pressure. Mention the emperor. Mention the commander. The leopard man grumbled. You're lucky the military police rules are so strict. Fine, but I'm bringing backup. As he left with 2 guards, Zahak turned his gaze back to the harbor. One day, he murmured, this land will fly the Aran banner. The Duchy of Bima will be a province. Linden, just one of many ports. Behind him, the YS woman kept filing her nails. So, who are we chasing again? Caruso, Gloria, who else? She was fishing. Zahak turned with ice in his eyes. Not your concern. Just know this. Succeed, and we all rise. Fail, and you vanish, not just from the ranks, but from life itself. The YS woman straightened up. Her smirk vanished. You're new here, Zahak continued. You don't understand Aran politics. Every step you take must be cautious. You stumble once, and you're forgotten. Twice, and you're dead. He let the words hang before softening, just slightly. There's a place called Heavenport in the East Sea, a pirate haven. If our targets make it there, none of US are going back. Might as well chip in 600 gold, buy a ship, and live as sea bandits. Is it really that serious? She asked, standing. It is. She didn't ask again. Moments later, she left the room, gathering a unit of military police. The net was closing, and Linden City, beautiful as it was.
Hey, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy our audiobooks, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to share your review in the comments section below.
2 days later, early morning, when the first ray of morning light breaks through the sky and shines on the entire East Coast. Finally, the Eternal Sect found a towering tree with lush branches and thick roots. There were no plants around the rubble pile. It seemed that all the water and nutrients in the soil had been sucked dry by it. A place of petition par excellence. In the special inspection team, in addition to Zahak, the general person in charge, there's also the adjutant who is responsible for supervising the work, and it is Marcus, the priest of the Eternal Sect. Start a petition. Marcus said this with a pious tone. His lower jaw seemed to have been removed. It was embedded with rough and somewhat rusty steel. The teeth below were all made of black metal. His tone was quite hoarse when he spoke. His hair was dry, and his face was covered with sharp scratches. A trace of kindness, his eyes are completely cloudy and blind, and he relies on some kind of magical power to observe the environment. Marcus wore a simple chainmail and a holy silver-white armband on his left hand, engraved with the emblem of the dragon of eternity and time, exactly the same as every gold coin circulating in the Western continent. What Zahak didn't know was that Marcus had already received information about the pursuers from the Patriarch, and that the Pope was now powerful enough to rival the Emperor. The existence of the disaster which is a blasphemy to the Eternal Lord. In order to cleanse the filth, a petition must be made so that the Dragon Lord can witness the believers' piety and give them strength. Marcus brought 81 death row prisoners from the dungeon of the Admiral's Castle in Linden City. Here, 99 also has the concept of an extreme number. Even the once lawless pirates and bandits were frightened out of their wits by this kind of battle. The priest, who was armed with over 20 black iron and heavy plate armor and was already a bit bloated, used a sharp axe to sharpen all the thick branches of this plump tree. It was a bulky giant who seemed to have some mental retardation. He was more than 5 meters tall. The nerves near his lips were confused. He twisted his lips left and right to speak incomprehensibly. With a frightening scream, the giant forcefully penetrated a prisoner. The branch penetrated into his belly and came out from his back. The giant continued to push inward stupidly, and the branches became thicker and thicker. The condemned prisoner's screams became louder and louder. In the end, it turned into a weak whimper. It had reached the end, and his head hit the trunk of the tree. The remaining 80 people couldn't sit still, and the lessons learned from the past were a bit scary. Fuck you, I'll give you a happy death. A pirate was extremely angry. The religion of Aram can be tyrannical in his own homeland. The criminals in the prison here want it, and the cowardly Admiral Pow doesn't dare to risk it. One was so frustrated. If I had been born 20 years earlier, I would have followed the old king and killed all of you dogs. Hush, be silent. Marcus was not angry. He needed silence now. What the hell, eternal dragon? The pirate hasn't finished speaking yet. He had been lifted out by a priest, and then he took out a flail full of iron spikes. More than a dozen priests also surrounded him. More than a dozen flails began to attack him, like a strong wind and rain. Each time they swung their arms in a large swing, exerting all their strength. Nearly half a minute later, it couldn't be called a corpse. There were no complete bones. The largest bone fragment was only the size of a fingernail. If you had to describe it, it was like a broth with too much salt that couldn't be dissolved. The petition continues. Within a few minutes, the petition umbrella was completed. The layout design on the tree focused on symmetrical composition, and the blood drops continued to fall like a localized shower. Their bodies have returned to the distant dust, while their souls have entered the peaceful eternity and found rest. Marcus said no more. The Eternal Sect is not a cult and does not require too much etiquette. The Dragon Lord is generous and kind. As long as the heart is sincere, it is enough. It is useless to talk too much. After listening to Zahak's words last night, Isnu couldn't sleep. She couldn't help no matter where she was. She had to find Caruso and Gloria. Whether she could keep her official title was a trivial matter. Her life was at stake. Early in the morning, before dawn, the YS girl was ready to ask her adjutant Marcus about his progress and whether he had found any secret anchorage along the nearby coast. Yalan is different from other countries. There is no separation of lords. No matter how big the Duke is, he is also the director of the provincial office. The imperial capital is centralized, and the influence of the palace is infinitely magnified. Being an official requires a seamless process. There is no secret harbor for avoiding taxes. Because of Taiwan, everyone monitors each other. If you are caught accidentally, you'll have to go to court. You win, and finally lose everything. I will stay steady and become a high official in the end. In other countries, when you go out to buy cigarettes, you will encounter 8 tax evasion and smuggling ports. As soon as the YS girl arrived, she saw Marcus doing business, and she felt a little sympathetic to the pirate. Why did she mess with him? See, Marcus is done. The YS girl no longer hesitated and stepped forward to ask about the progress. Priest, how is the search for the secret ports along the coast going? The Dragon Lord hasn't given the direction yet. Marcus replied calmly. He was blind and could sense everything with the invisible magic that surrounded him. The women in YS are all stupid. So what he means is, you guys haven't started yet? I'm going to do something big, brother. I can't catch anyone, my aunt. I'm going to turn into a bandit. Wait, I saw some kind of piracy bill in Travels of Arcania. Women can't be taken on board. The reason why some pirate ships bring women is as a tool to vent their anger. That's not someone who wants to be thrown into a boat. It seems pretty good, but as time goes by, you may still be unable to bear it, so you might as well give up. Marcus said so. Isanu did not dare to refute at all. The Eternal Sect was very powerful in Alanya, and the power of these priests was at its peak. It would not be a big problem to kill herself on the spot. Thinking about what happened to that pirate, I might as well forget it. Okay, I'll take my leave now. Isu has nothing to say, and is going to go back to find Zahak and ask Zahak to deal with this priest. Can't he cure you bunch of bastards? Half an hour later, the YS woman successfully waved people over. Zahak had done everything in detail in the past 2 days, but something went wrong at this link. before coming. He had ordered the military police to take over the work that Marcus should do and search the secret port. He came to confront Marcus. Zahak's eyes were cold, and Marcus was looking at the cliffs on the coast. They are all blind. How can they still see the scenery? Isu woman cursed. Let's see how my elder brother treats you. Marcus. Zahak called him by his first name and added, this matter has far-reaching consequences. How dare you be so slack? Zahak looked at the petition umbrella. It was ridiculous to do such nonsense at this time. The Pope was now covering the sky with only one hand in the country, and these hawks were becoming more and more arrogant. Are you religious? Marcus asked rhetorically. Aram believes in freedom. I don't believe in the so-called eternal Lord. I am only loyal to the Emperor. Zahak doesn't mince words. The YS girl almost cheered. He is indeed a big brother. He is so handsome. The commander of the military police gave me the highest authority for this operation. You should have fulfilled your duty of supervision, but you have violated the law. I can kill you now. Zahak drew his sword out of its sheath. Blood-red mist flashed, and the blade turned completely crimson. The moment it was pulled out, the birds in the forest fled away in fear and screamed wildly. The priests, numbering 20 or so, were not afraid of Zahak at all. They wore black iron dragon mask masks with only 2 holes showing for the eyes. They were extremely fierce and approached one after another. Hush, be silent. Marcus sensed something. The Dragon Lord is giving guidance. Zahak looked back and saw that the pool of blood under the big tree was flowing slowly like a bloody hand, crawling several meters away and then dissipating into blood mud. Zahak frowned. He didn't think it was a guide, but Marcus' fault. The high-ranking people in the sect knew the techniques, and Marcus was only strong but not weak. Seeing that Marcus was still so stubborn, it was impossible for him to actually kill him. But it was so brilliant that Zahak breathed a sigh of relief. Since you are obsessed with the guidance, then so be it. I will lead people to complete all the remaining search work. If there is an error in the guidance, Marcus, it will be difficult for you to go back. Zahak said no more and left with the girl YS. Although Marcus is blind, he can still sense the direction of the bloody hand. Although his face is expressionless, his heart is actually in a state of turmoil, because the Dragon Lord actually showed up. His head turned to that side, which was the direction of the secret port where the BlackSail pirates docked. The 2 military police guards were on their way back to Linden City. The horse's hooves were clattering, and he was walking slowly. After all, he was an animal and could not keep galloping all the time. I really want to take a train that will be able to carry passengers soon, but it's a pity that I can't go back. It would be too painful to be forced to become a pirate and be ruined by a ship of people. The YS girl was extremely nervous, and the priest wanted to do bad things. You don't have to worry. The commander treats me well. He knows that if this trip fails, we will definitely lose our titles. That's why he dragged the Holy See into trouble and shared the responsibility. It just so happens that Marcus is playing tricks, so you can read his book. If this trip fails, we can go back to Aram. Although the future is slim, we will definitely be demoted or we will not be able to convince the public, but we still have official salary to live the rest of our lives. At that time, the commander will report to the Emperor that the so-called Dragon Lord is not if you are reliable. You can ruin the national affairs of Syria, and you can also attack the Holy See and use this to settle the general score with the Holy See. Zahak made his judgment. Finally, I don't have to be wheeled anymore. The boulder in Isu's heart fell. The East Coast is so vast that even if a dragnet is set, it will still be dense and sparse. Cheer up. I'm not telling you to give up. If you're demoted again, you will be the lowest military policeman. Do you want to live like that for the rest of your life? Even so, you can only succeed, not fail. Zahak felt that he had spoken too harshly yesterday and had frightened this little girl out of her wits. This was not a good thing, so calming her down would not make her give up on herself. The reason why the commander cultivated himself was for his own sake. With a confidant working in the Imperial Guard, all kinds of methods could be used. Moreover, I must not be defeated, and I cannot stop here. Setting up the balance with the Holy See, do you want to establish other faiths as state religions? the YS girl asked in a daze. Zahak was completely speechless. This was no longer a question of whether to join the political world, but a complete lack of common sense. This kind of mentality should not lead an official career. The Eternal Sect has been rooted for thousands of years. During this period, Alan split and reorganized countless times, but it still exists tenaciously. It is impossible for our generation to eliminate its influence. At least we must replace the Pope with a normal person, the Emperor. The people here are not just fake magic sticks. Zahak said calmly, the scary thing about religious forces is that sometimes their leaders don't care about power and money. It would be great just to do that, but unfortunately not. They are often completely out of control, just pure, serving those who have no reason to exist. The devil is startling. There's no news yet from the other side. We must stick to the coast. It's just a matter of these 2 days. Put away your careless behavior. It's not as simple as arresting people. There must be someone on the other side to respond. Murder is everywhere. This foreign country may also be us. Place of death. Zahak said coldly. Isu knew swallowed her throat. It was too terrible to be an official in Aram. The other side of the east coast. Shuni Town. Lakeside Villa. Claude and Lee Sight were fishing by the lake. Claude still hasn't completely cut off the past, because he hasn't killed the Arameans yet. However, after making the decision to become a pirate, I unexpectedly relaxed, as if I had gained some kind of relief. It seems that from now on I no longer need to be careful about what I say and do. Lee's sight was about to collapse. Claude kept pouring out his frustrations. Why was it that the palace was having a hard time, and he was being criticized by the Vatican? He didn't want to hear the greasy middle-aged man complaining. If he kept talking, I would charge for psychological consultation. Stop nagging, you emperor and pope. Purely cerebral palsy. Do you think I'm trying to make a fool of him? When you become a pirate, you don't want to think about the past. What kind of bird and dragon has a temper and comes down from the sky to mess with me? 1, 2, 3, don't you dare. If you dare to come to the East Coast, your hood will be pulled off by him, and you'll have to slap him in the face. The Lord of Eternity and Time must be the singer. Lee Sight smoked a cigarette disdainfully. Claude was a little surprised. Such remarks were shocking to the world. If he were in Syria, he would be stoned to death by believers in the street. The mountains are high, and the emperor is far away in this poor place. If you have anything to say, you can speak freely and do anything. No one will care about you even if you go naked. Lee Sight saw that Claude had caught a few fish. He was still in Air Force, and he was a little unhappy. Halt! Lee Sight stood up, put away the fishing rod, laid it horizontally, and cut it in half with his knees, and stopped fishing. Claude's men are all veterans who have received military training and have participated in several battles. They have rich experience. To go from the inland to Lavender Town, you must take 2 roads in the northwest. A search line has been formed. Gloria and the others didn't need to be here to know that they were coming. What does Heavenly Port look like? Claude couldn't help but ask, after hearing Lee Sight say that it's over here and he has to stay there for a while. Siadi smiled and said, the center of the universe, reaching the highest port in the universe, the port of heaven, is called the Kingdom of Heaven. It must be an auspicious place. Lee Sight almost choked when he drank the water. The center of the universe is not so fake, but the auspiciousness is not so auspicious. The Count asked us to arrive on the 10th day. It's almost here. Is there any movement yet? Lee Sight and others have stayed here for 2 nights. They can't sleep well at all. It's too tiring. If someone dies on the way and he is still waiting stupidly, isn't that a waste of time? But it's not a loss if he dies, and he give 1,002 golden dragons for nothing. But I don't know how long it will take for him to transform. What will we do if we never come? Swan was very cautious because BlackSail was not just a job now, but the Thieves' Guild had already targeted him. If he waited a little longer, the people sent by the guild would not be spies, but experts in the field of political assassination, who would be better than himself. Only strong, not weak. Don't worry, tomorrow is the 10th day. Let's wait for 2 more days. If the night after tomorrow passes, we won't serve you anymore. Lee Sight had to take care of the emotions of the entire ship's backbone. People as cautious as oaks, Infant couldn't wait that long. Claude frowned, then relaxed quickly. His mood was extremely complicated. He didn't know if he wanted them to come or if he wanted them to die on the way. Perhaps it was to cut off the violent anxiety in Claude's heart. At this moment, a horse galloped from the forest. It was one of Claude's men. "People are coming." The man quickly reined in his horse and reported that it was not the three of them who had arrived in secret together as imagined. Something serious was going on. "Where?" Lee Sight asked, and all four people by the lake tensed their hearts. "It's approaching noon." When Zahak heard that Marcus did not search the secret port in the morning, he immediately took over the job and started it with the highest efficiency, and it was in full swing. Facing the air and military police wearing ivory white military uniforms, these people from the secret port did not lose their temper at all and accepted the inspection honestly. In just one morning, 11 secret ports have been searched, and some military police have been left to guard them. Even the nobles of Linden City did not dare to be angry and just waited for the storm to pass in the past few days to continue doing business. On the rammed earth road next to the sea cliff, there are 20 errant military policemen searching in the green forest. After buying the intelligence dealer, all the secret ports along the coast have been uncovered. The people here are really cowards. No wonder I was killed so badly by the Emperor before. What kind of fight can I have with this kind of virtue? I'll check it out quickly at the next port and go back to eat. A military policeman said arrogantly that the work here is going very smoothly. Although it is in a foreign country, the treatment is better than at home. No one at the port dares to disobey orders, and he is not aware of his identity as an Aramean. Quite proud. You can't say that. I also participated in the battle here nearly 20 years ago. The Bima people are very bloody, and the women are also very sexy, haha. The leading short-haired gendarmerie captain was quite old. He managed to get the position of captain by relying on his seniority. He continued to brag. "We were all thieves in the army at that time. We wanted to make war fortune. Otherwise, who the hell would be a soldier? Let's fight. It's a place where women can do whatever they want, and I fucked more than 20 of them." The other dozen or so military policemen were shocked. Were they so wild before? Isn't military law prohibiting those behaviors? A young gendarme couldn't believe it. Now is now, and then was before. Yalan was not as rich as he is now. The nobles could not even get 4 horses of the same color to travel, and they were all defeated by people of my generation. The gendarmerie captain was boasting. "Be careful. Ahead is the giant cave that the city people talk about. It's also a secret port." The rather cautious middle-aged man in the military police warned. "The command of the commander is in the hands of the boss. Why should I be afraid? These places are the territory of the nobles in the city. The big ones are silent, and the small ones no one dares to mess around." The captain was unimpressed. The group of people walked down the hillside, along the rammed earth road without vegetation, and walked all the way into the cliff cave. The light began to fade, and from now on it was a stone road paved by hand. There was someone guarding the entrance to the cave. A group of people with unkind faces stared at the group of military police. There were people from all races, but none of them opened their mouths. They just looked at them coldly. "Look at how poor this place is. The clothes smell like the sea." The gendarmerie captain led the people and continued walking deeper into the cave. But the further down they went, the more something felt wrong. More than 20 people stared at them silently along the way, and all they could hear was the sound of waves hitting the rocks on the shore. The sparkling waves of light swayed on the cave wall into murderous intent. They had also searched a secret port before. There were pirates there, and they also carried weapons, but the atmosphere was completely different from now. When the captain of the gendarmerie was about to reach the trestle, he saw that there were only a few semi-abandoned, empty ships docked in the entire giant cave with no people on them. There was only one ship with people on the deck. A super large sea cliff that can accommodate 20 or 30 ships, but only one ship is parked. Even a fool would realize that there is a big problem. "Let's go," the gendarmerie captain whispered to the others, immediately changed the route with great agility, turned around and walked towards the entrance. But more than 20 pirates who had been guarding the intersection came down from the entrance and blocked the road. Every face showed a cold-blooded expression of indifference to life and death, which was horrifying. "What are you doing?" "We are the Syrian military police. We are here to inspect on the orders of the commander. Get out of the way immediately." The gendarmerie captain had been through big scenes and drew his sword, knowing he was in trouble. The remaining gendarmes also raised their broadswords, but many of the gendarmes who came in through connections did not get along well at all. In addition to physical training at home, they only did clerical work. This time a mission was to arrest people. I thought it would be easy to come. I was reviewing my resume here, and I had never experienced life or death at all. I was a little panicked for a while, and one of the swords accidentally fell to the ground. Boom! There was a huge and dull sound. Something hit the trestle heavily, and the wooden trestle made a faint creaking sound with every step. A group of military police looked back. What Lee's sight said before leaving was, "Kill first. Ask questions later." "Uncle, I like killing Arameans the most." Woolman lifted a 200-pound tomahawk with a blade as wide as the door panel and dropped it directly on the head of a military policeman. Under the huge force, it was literally split into two, and the axe blade seemed to be inserted into nothing. The top of the head to the lower body split smoothly. The chocolate-like silky, smooth-cut surface was smooth, the contents poured out, and the two halves fell to the ground with extreme violence. Arrange, in formation, the training formation to defend against the enemy. The young deputy captain among the 20 military police said with a trembling voice, holding up Jien Kankuo. But none of these relatives had ever seen this battle before, and their courage was frightened, and they froze in place. Several of them still passed the psychological quality test, and, at the same time, they slashed at Woolman with their swords. Woolman didn't even need armor. The BlackSails that came with his natural talent were able to withstand these attacks effortlessly, and nothing happened other than hearing a noise. You don't even have the strength to kill people, but you still dare to come out as a soldier. How can you still get paid? Ren flew out and disemboweled a military policeman. His claws were extremely sharp, and he would die or be maimed if he scratched the vital part. Morrison stood on the side of the ship and watched. He was not needed at all. Woolman alone was more than enough for this kind of situation. 100 of these miscellaneous soldiers would not be the opponent of this strange lizard. This was better than being crushed by a werewolf at the sight of it. In the game, he likes to join the fun and get nervous. If the game is against the wind, he will start to be on the verge of even competition. The scene that followed was too horrifying. Woolman didn't use any weapons because his hatred was too deep. He stretched out his huge palms, pressed his head, and crushed it like an orange, crushing several heads in succession. The morale of the remaining military police dropped to negative and began to flee, but how could the 20-something pirates blocked behind give them a chance? They took out everything and stabbed them wildly. The famous Aran military police were as vulnerable as paper, but no one was injured. There was blood on the stone road. What happened? Archer came running over with a clanging sound. He was sleeping, but was woken up by Oaks. "It's okay, you should rest." Oaks called him up just in case. Now it seemed that there were no powerful people among these people. They were just a ragtag group. He himself found a corner to close his eyes and rest, waiting for Lee's sight to give a signal and lead the way to Lavender Town. Kill directly. Stone slabs on the slope road. Seeing that Woolman was about to kill the last person. "Wait." Finn interrupted him, walked down the gangway, and came to Woolman's side. "This man has excellent psychological quality. I'm afraid he is the only one who has actually fought in a war. You're the leader of this group of people, right?" Funru asked. The captain of the military police was quite sensible. He threw away his sword calmly and raised his hands in surrender. There was something strange in this port. It was almost like he was the one who was taking care of Caruso and the others. "Well, telling me everything saved my life." The captain of the gendarmerie is extremely wise. The captain of the military police never imagined that he would be tortured like this by pirates. "I told you to tell me everything. Let me finish." The gendarmerie captain was tied to a large wooden board with hemp ropes. The wooden board was laid flat on two benches. His limbs and torso were tied tightly, and only his head could be lifted up 5 or 6 centimeters. "We are all honest people, and we are afraid of being deceived." Rin smiled evilly, activated his Torture King attribute, and asked Haywood to bring him a carpenter's hammer and large nails. To be on the safe side, Finn had to make sure he was telling the truth, so he let Rin mess around. A large group of pirates on the deck were all numb when they saw Rin's behavior. Bosun's game is really perverted. A green-skinned orc pirate whispered, drinking wine with a few friends he met on the ship to watch the commander's operations. The captain of the military police yelled from the board as Rin used a hammer to drive a nail up from the bottom of the board, between the back of the captain's head and his neck. Bang, bang, bang. The sharp nails were driven up 5 centimeters. He had to use his neck muscles to lift his head up, otherwise the nails would explode if they touched too much. Micah came up to watch the show when he had nothing to do. He was also convinced. He was still the same as the third child, with lemon teeth, nails on the board, and stuffy bedding. The so-called doctor's benevolence made him feel a little bored and had no new life. After he came up, he went back to read a book. Look, this is not difficult. What is difficult is to persist for 3 hours or 5 hours. The current longest record is 17 hours. And you, my friend, can you become a real hero? Ren looked at the military police captain, who kept his head 6 centimeters away from the board, and said calmly. Wallman was also on the side. This soldier was in his 40s. He might have invaded the Principality of Bima or the Great Wetland before. He was watching with interest. Starting now, Heavenly Harbor's Million Questions and Answers. Special winter event. Every time you answer a question correctly, your burden will be reduced for 1 hour. Please listen to the question, what is the bust size of the famous minstrel Chile? And answer within 10 seconds. Ren began to host the show seriously, banging the wooden board with a hammer. Fun surrendered to this idiot. Business was more important. Now, the military police have searched here. If they find someone missing here from their stronghold, they will definitely come to check. It's only sooner or later, but the later the better. But now the person they want to arrest is not on our ship. This is not Yalin. It's the East Coast. Strong dragons can't overwhelm local snakes. Even if we kill these 20 people, they won't take the risk to fight a tough battle, but they will definitely send more people to monitor this place. Caruso and the others will come sooner or later. The captain has been there for 2 days, and the people should be arriving soon, and everyone is ready to act according to the deployment. Finn said calmly, even if the number 20 person is not killed, there are only a few junks and a ship parked here, which will definitely attract attention. Killing them early will save trouble, so as not to change the communication when returning. You should be a small leader. Now I want to ask about your strategy, the names of the main characters, your top officers, and the people who speak and manage things. What are their characteristics, background, and skills? Fenru was cross-examining. The intelligence dealers in the city had no access to these, so they could only ask this person. Not bad, very clear idea. Archer knew that a big event was coming in the next 2 days, so he didn't drink, but he started to pretend to understand. Just rest, brother. Ren was convinced. After Ren's severe punishment, although it is not painful now, the psychological pressure is gradually rising. The gendarmerie captain told everything he knew. This area along the coast is stubbornly guarding. The commander-in-chief, Zahak, was born into a noble family. He once learned swordsmanship from the Sword King of Aram. His skills were astonishing. He destroyed several cult strongholds in Aram and made great contributions. His political skills were also quite successful, and he was promoted to the rank of general. There is also a runner-up in one of the imperial arenas. He is a 2.5-meter leopard man with unparalleled strength and amazing combat skills. He is good at using a huge sword and is extremely terrifying. He serves as a school officer. There is also a YS woman who is also a school officer and a confidant as a hawk, whose strength is unknown. The most important thing is a priest named Marcus. Because he slacked on military orders, the task of searching the secret port fell on the unlucky military police. Except for the people here. There's also a group of people chasing Caruso and others, including a general and a school officer, with hundreds of soldiers and horses. After listening to what the gendarmerie captain said, Finn judged that this was true. It was impossible for ordinary people to compile a fairly well-organized team in such a short period of time and under high-intensity psychological pressure. These people could withstand scrutiny and be entrusted with important tasks by Yalin senior management, especially the so-called Marcus. The mysterious man is protected by the heavenly punishers of the Holy Spirit Church, so this is inseparable from the dispute between the religious parties. Fuck, it's serious. It's blocked from the front and back. Rin took a breath. This is not only a big fucking job. No wonder the Earl gives him 1,002 golden dragons and a privateering certificate as soon as he is asked. This is taking these brothers into a ditch. It is a huge job. Belong to yes. Brother Shah, what do you say? Archer was not convinced and asked the invincible Brother Shah to think of a solution. Let me give it a try. I can become the so-called Sword King's apprentice. Morrison said casually. It's stable. Rin nodded and began to use his judgment. Brother Shah said it was difficult, just to torture for a while and feel good. Brother Shah said it was reluctant, which means explosive kills. Let's try this. Let's put it this way, Zahak. It's a matter of one knife. Thank you. Morrison was speechless. If you opened the champagne at halftime, wouldn't you be trying to raise a flag for me? The Sword King's apprentice is still somewhat capable of being on the stage. The million questions and answers at Tianguo Port have ended. Do you have any last words? Ren looked at the military police captain on the wooden board, preparing to do some hospice care. I've said everything I know. If I don't go back, I can join you. The gendarmerie captain's neck was already a little sore at this time. 17 hours? What a fierce guy. Ren pretended to cry and said, Friend, I also want to help you, but this man doesn't agree. Wallman stepped forward slowly. Uncle! Click! He cut it in half neatly, and then ordered a few sailors to improve the food for the fish in the water. Finn looked at the sky outside the cave. It was almost the appointed time. The Raven hadn't flown back yet, and he didn't know what the situation was like on Lee Sight's side. Lee Sight must receive someone before he can take action on his side, otherwise he will be in an extremely passive situation. The other side, 60 miles northwest of Lavender Town. Lee Sight, Xiadi, Swan, and Claude, 4 of them, galloped up and set off a wave of dust in the official road of the dense forest. It's really killing me. Lee Sight's head was as big as a bucket. He understood that it was not as simple as picking up people and dodging them. There would definitely be interceptions and killings, but he never thought that he would have to rescue people. This meant that he and the others would have to face the Yalin military police, a general and a school officer, as well as hundreds of elite soldiers. It's really a death-defying thing. Why didn't Gloria break out? But you, Lao, dang. Lee Sight was speechless. The vanguard of the pursuers had already caught up with the 3 of them. During the melee, Caruso killed more than 30 people and broke out, but got separated from the other 2. Gloria took the mysterious man to the Wind Breeze Canyon 80 miles away. Deal with the pursuers. Caruso was dressed the same as a wandering swordsman, with a tattered gray cloak, a broadsword, shoulder-length curly hair, and a short beard, and a sinister face. He knew that if he went back, he would be done with it, and he would have to bring in reinforcements. Gloria's strength extraordinary. The master should not be underestimated. If he just runs away and deals with it, he can last for a long time. Want to open the box? Swan's spirit was a little tense. He had always been lurking and assassinating, and he was always under control. He had never dealt with this kind of chaos before. No, not now, not before we get them out. Lee Sight's eyes were cold. All the arrangements, they were based on the premise that he would receive people in Lavender Town. If he did it now, it would be a big deal. It seemed that the final reward of this order was the privateering license, but in fact it was not the case. Such big news now made Lee Sight think about it. He had to choose between the privateering license and the Wind's Breath Canyon. Many years ago, was once a prosperous mining town. It was used to collect a kind of psychic crystal, or called Wind's Breath Stone, which was used as a material for warlocks or used with other auxiliary materials to process it into the houses of wealthy people. Room temperature adjustment facilities. This is how the canyon got its name. As the mineral resources dried up and were mined to all, the barren mountains and rivers naturally became deserted. But there are still many remains of ancient towns, rusty mining iron piles, and ruined walls that look extremely desolate amidst the eternal desolation of the ultramarine mountains. The swift wind in the canyon terrain is also quite blowing. Are you sure this is where it is? Lee Sight and his party tied their horses to a tree beside the galloping road. It was already afternoon, and they didn't know whether it would be late or whether the two men were still alive. To deal with the pursuers, running on the road is just a matter of killing them. You must leave the stone road and enter the deep mountains and dense forests. The horses in the Western continent are all serious horses, not the flying dragons in the Skyrim province who can escape through time and space. The horse cannot cope with the complex terrain with steep slopes and dense bushes. Go straight southeast, about 15 miles. Caruso took out a brass compass with complicated carvings and simple texture from his tattered clothes. The pointer pointed to the deep mountains and old forests in the southeast. This compass was a psychic prop. There were 2 compasses in a pair, with a range limit of 100 miles. They will mark each other's location. You can see many abandoned mines over there. It's a good place to hide, but I don't know if they have collapsed over time. Claude judged this, and at this time, more than 20 of his men also came over to join the rescue operation. There's no time. We must pick up the person before the sun goes down. If we don't find the person until night, not only will the difficulty on our side increase, but something may happen at the port. Lee Sight thought that the pursuers here might also send people to communicate with the military police in Linden City. Damn it, they encountered the worst situation. By then, the road from Lavender Town to Megon would be blocked, which meant that BlackSail wants an all-out war with those Arameans. This is not a matter of fighting a way out, but a life-and-death battle of annihilation between the two sides. We have to let the invincible general think of a way. Every minute must be fought for now. The later we delay, the faster the traffic jam in Linden City will be. Lee Sight asked one of Claude's men to borrow a handy broadsword to use as a trailblazer in the jungle. He had already cut down several shrubs. There were not only trees in the jungle. The rainfall in coastal areas would cause many bushes to grow. Plant. Don't be so troublesome. You must conserve your strength. Caruso's current impression of the group of 4 is fairly reliable. Although he smells of sea and is a typical pirate, his judgment is not bad, and the Earl's vision is not bad. Caruso put his hand on his broadsword. His dry and cracked lips kept opening and closing, and whispered a prayer. He was praying to the god of light and thunder among the 13 holy spirits, also known as the Lord of the Endless Sky. Don't do it now, brother. Lee Sight was dumbfounded. He was truly a fool of the Holy Sea. Claude interrupted Lee Sight and told him to stop talking. As a native of Allen City, he knew the magic of each holy sea. He also understood the position of the Punisher better than BlackSail and the others, and in a broad sense, all the incredible phenomena. They are all called magic, but there are many ways to do it, extending into countless categories, such as astrology, prophecy, arcana, incantation, etc., and the Holy See calls them magic miracles. It is not that just reciting prayers will be directly effective, otherwise everyone will be punished by heaven. Prayer is just a medium or a psychological suggestion to oneself. It is deeply involved and mysterious, and may be related to the wish of faith. It's related to power. It's not that people are confused and can't figure out the relationship, and no one knows whether there is a real God. The Heavenly Punisher is a being in the Church of the Holy Spirit who can sense the Holy Spirit and borrow part of it from the infinite power of the Holy Spirit. As Caruso put his hand on the sword, with a strange buzzing sound, the golden thunder light coiled around the sword blade like countless flying silk snakes, lingering around, turning into a mess and surging wildly with terrifying momentum. Xiadi and C1 were both shocked. The Heavenly Punisher had some skills. A wipe. Lee Sight is confused. He really has the Holy Spirit. General Fun is killing people. His atheism doesn't work. Damn it. He has paid greetings to all the named gods in this land in the past 10 years. Isn't that right? Going to suffer? But it has been fine for so many years. It must have been the second master who blocked it for him. Guangong will last forever. Caruso walked in front of Li's sight and led the way. When he encountered a bush blocking the road, he used his thunder sword to scorch them all into charred powder. The efficiency was many times higher. Li's sight calmed down. Now was not the time to think about these things. The 5 of him could just go. The horses on the way back must be watched carefully, otherwise they would be blocked and killed without any body parts, and more than 20 of Claude's subordinates would be left behind. It's here. Under the guidance of Caruso, the group of 5 people walked through the dense forest as quickly as possible, walking all the way down the hillside, crossing the stream, and heading toward the compass mark of the Punisher. They are all on the verge of life and death, and no one can be inferior in physical fitness. Half an hour later, Li's sight and others came face to face with the Yalan pursuers who had formed an encirclement network. These pursuers were all too familiar with Caruso's face. Their combat literacy is infinitely higher than that of Linden City. The pursuers are not on the same level as the besiegers who are brushing up on their resumes. The first second the gendarmerie captain laid eyes on these people. Line up, 6 o'clock position, shoot. The musketry team of more than 10 people raised their guns at the same time, pressed the triggers, and shot at the group of 5 people. Not to mention Caruso and Claude. BlackSail and his gang have had dozens of large and small sea encounters, killing countless pirates, navy, merchant ship guards, and bounty hunters. How could they not be familiar with this? The 5 people reacted very quickly, and they all hid behind the trees. As the gunshots were fired and the smoke filled the air, the accuracy of the muskets was extremely poor, and no one was hit. The military police captain was extremely well educated and knew that the Heavenly Punisher was extremely powerful. He chased him all the way from the giant wall to the east coast and killed more than 70 or 80 people on his side. The rest must have been reinforcements from the coast. How could he be his opponent? By the time they finished reloading, the enemy had already come over to kill them. They immediately ordered them to disperse and retreat, defend themselves with close-quarters weapons, and move closer to the position of the school officer. Without hesitation, a group of military police began running up the mountainside. Xiadi and Swan were known for their speed, so how could they give them this chance? This is not an assassination, but a frontal battle. Swan did not use a dagger, but held 2 daggers in his mouth, flew out with his limbs, and at the moment of leaping to kill, he held the daggers in both hands and jumped to a gendarme. On the back, the 2 knives were crossed on his neck, and he immediately bowed his head, blood gushing out from the broken neck. Xiadi once traveled to the far eastern islands and learned Qigong. At least that's what he said. It was really like a light body technique. I leaned sideways on a tree and took a few vertical steps at a 90-degree angle. Then I kicked hard, and I was flying through the forest with the force of the fast pedal. The black raincoat snaked around like a ghostly phantom. Moving, the thin-edged lancet decapitated one person first, and the other person had no time to react. The knife was inserted into the back, and a large section emerged from the front of the belly and was stabbed directly. In terms of foot strength, Caruso and Claude are also top-notch. They quickly catch up. Caruso's lightning sword has amazing destructive power. It cuts through gold and iron. The military policeman's sword was cut into 2 pieces when he blocked it. The chainmail armor also seemed to be in vain. It was cut off sideways, and the upper body fell off. The large section was burnt to a crisp without even a drop of blood coming out. "What's wrong with you?" Caruso yelled at Claude. Claude's forehead was covered with sweat for some reason, and his sword movement was hesitant, but he was defeated by a military policeman. Caruso couldn't believe that this tall man with strong muscles and more than 20 soldiers was being pressed down and beaten by conferring honors and knighthoods, returning home in glory. Li's sight understood Claude's concerns and repeated it loudly. Now that the Punisher himself is here, he understands that what he said is true. Just when the military policeman was about to stab Claude in the chest with his sword. Click! That sword was like electricity in the dark night, just like a gust of wind blowing by. The military policeman was cut in half on the spot. A few drops of blood spattered on Claude's hand. He stared blankly at the bright red and warm liquid on his left hand, and he could never look back. The certificate of submission was accepted. Claude understood that from now on, he was already a pirate. The remaining 2 gendarmes in front of him were frightened. Claude had already entered the house when he was 15 years old, let alone now. The 2 swords were tricky and swift, and the silver light whirled with unparalleled sword intent. One sword and the other, the body's head was in a different place, and the head could not stop rolling down the slope of the dense forest. Caruso felt relieved. That was what he was talking about. Lisite used the cuckoo of frost to cry for blood. The reason why he can win glory for the country in North America is that he naturally needs an American macho physique, coupled with exotic 3-dimensional facial features, so that he can have crazy international interactions with local female college students and beach hotties. Years of experience in fighting at sea cannot be overshadowed. The warhammer first hit the military policeman's arm and then opened a large gourd, denting the Tianling cap, and killed him on the spot. Swan caught up with the gendarmerie captain at the front. But the gendarmerie captain was a thief. He had a small flintlock rifle hidden in his arms and was about to fire. It was not accurate to shoot at close range. Thunder and lightning crackled. Caruso held a spear gun completely composed of free electric light in his hand and threw it towards the gendarmerie captain. As fast as thunder, it might as well be said to be lightning itself. It blasted directly through his chest, blasting a big hole. Through the black, smoking, round hole, you could see the scenery behind him, and he died on the spot. Awesome, bro. Lisite was surprised. He was such a fierce man. Why not earn him aboard the ship? At this point, the musketeer team of more than 10 people was finished. The 4 of them all had some blood stains on their bodies, but Caruso was the only one who insisted on being blood-free. Where to go now? Lisite asked Caruso. He was in urgent need. When the people from Linden City blocked up again, his group would not be able to fly, let alone save people. This inaccessible ghost place was the place where he and others would die. Only a mile to go. Caruso glanced at the compass and quickly continued to clear the way. 3 minutes later, the group of people came to the large flat land on the mountainside. The surrounding area was surrounded by the remains of the former Fengxi mining town. There were many broken walls, rusty iron frames, and a mine passage dug out of the mountain. Lisite felt that the current situation could no longer be described as extremely unlucky. By coincidence, not only his group of people arrived at their destination, but the pursuers also blocked Gloria and the others. More than 50 highly qualified armed military police and a man who looked like an officer stared at him with cold expressions. They were not panicked at all in an encounter, but were quite calm. There's another person in Gloria who is in the mine ahead. Gloria may be dead, but the other person is not. They only capture the alive ones. Caruso added calmly. That's a military police officer. He's very powerful. I'll clear a way for you. Go back as quickly as possible. Lisite was greatly shocked. This is not a jungle now. We have the advantage of terrain. On the flat ground, you can fight dozens of people and a school officer by yourself. Not to mention you are a Punisher. Skywalker might even come over with a lightsaber. Not very good. What kind of generous and tragic person? Claude, please stay. The Dark Elf and Kajiat and I will fight into the mine. Lisite made a judgment. Caruso, do you understand what you're doing? No matter whether you have defected from the Holy Spirit cult or not, the Holy Spirit cult is inseparable from this matter. Someone must have instigated it. Your leader may be being tortured now. The Ministry of Punishments, the means, are unimaginable. The school officer's tone was sarcastic and heart-wrenching. Caruso's psychological quality will naturally not be aroused by these words. Really, the Holy Spirit Church has many martyrs. Caruso added, I have handed over my destiny to the gods in heaven and will act according to the plan. Caruso stopped talking nonsense and took the lead in charging away, followed closely by Claude. Lisite was a little surprised. The Holy See was so arrogant. How could he not be a real strong man? The 3 of them also joined in the breakthrough. Thunder and lightning exploded, swords were sharp, and several corpses were scattered in a matter of seconds. Now is not the time for indecision. Lisite and the other 3 went straight to the mine, with Shadowswan walking ahead faster. Where to go? The military police officer's weapon was a long spear, which he raised towards Lisite. The tip of the spear was as cold as a torch, and the stab would definitely penetrate his heart. Your opponent is me. Caruso deflected the shot with his horizontal sword. The three of them entered the mine and drove straight in. Lisite felt something bad and had an extremely ominous premonition. The lamp holders on both sides of the tunnel were all lit with torches. It couldn't be Gloria and the others. Someone was already inside. 70 meters deep into the tunnel, Xiadi and Swan eliminated several military policemen along the way, like chopping melons and vegetables, and came to an open mine room with an area of more than 1,000 square meters. The lights here are bright, and there are abandoned and rusty mine cars and tracks on the ground, as well as some heavy mining tools that were not removed back then, and some broken boxes. When Lisite saw the scene in front of him, his heart almost stopped. He did meet the other two of the three. Gloria is indeed as published in the Adventurers Guild newspaper. The contours of her facial features are exactly the same as those outlined in the prints. She is named Moonwheel because of her long, light cyan hair and clear and beautiful face. Her cold phoenix eyes are icy blue rainbow. The pupils are like a clear spring in the snow-capped mountains, and the tall and exquisite curves clinging to each other under the leather armor are like sculptures, creating a stunning silhouette. Unfortunately, he was already seriously injured, and he was sitting in the corner with his chest rising and falling slowly. Next to her stood a slender figure wrapped in a black robe and mask, who seemed to be protecting Gloria. What really made Lisite almost suffer a cardiac arrest. In the mine room, there's also a man who looks like a ruthless character. No doubt, he is the overall leader of this pursuit. Lisite's eyelids twitched, and all bad things happened to him. Huh? The reinforcements are here. His voice was hoarse, carrying the pressure of superior. The obsidian-like ink armor made him extremely tall. Under the sharp short hair like steel needles was a terrifying face. A scar ran from the corner of his mouth to behind the ear, which seemed to be on his body. Some kind of evil spell had been cast on him, and there were weird blood-red runes crawling from his neck to one side of his face. He was holding a 1.5-meter-long broad-bladed sword in his hand, which was unparalleled in aura. I am the Major General of the Aran Gendarmerie Guards. Edmund, with the way you are dressed and the smell of the sea, you must be pirates from the East Coast, right? It's really weird. This dark elf skin is actually whiter than that of the high elf. Yes, miscellaneous, or what? Edmund was rude. Xiadi was immediately furious. Lisite secretly thought something was wrong. He wanted to stop Xiadi, but Gloria was cut and injured. He was a heroic adventurer, but it was already too late. No one could stop him at this time. Fuck you. I'll chop you up and then kill your whole family. As agile as a dragon, a strong wind blew up as Xiadi stepped forward. Her silver hair flashed into white light as she swayed. The torch in the mine swayed and dimmed, and when the lancet was turned, the mysterious energy from the far east was exerted on the blade. Just a pirate trick. Edmund drew his sword wildly, and the entire mine room trembled faintly. There was a sonorous sound and sparks like waterfalls. Under the extremely domineering slash, the lancet broke into two halves. Edmund kicked him horizontally, and Xiadi crossed his arms in front of his chest to protect him, but was kicked 4 to 5 meters away, killing in 10 strikes. Edmund was surprised by the man's silence, and stabbed with his backhand sword. Swan was already standing on the broad-bladed sword, and slashed towards Edmund's unarmored head with both swords. It's another thief's dirty work. Edmund caught one of the knives in his armored hand, and ignored the tube inserted into his neck. Seeing that Swan was about to die, the knife was about to be inserted into Edmund's throat. The blood-red runes on his skin flowed, and the tip of the knife could not enter another inch. How can this be? Knowing he was outmatched, Swan quickly retreated, turned over and hung on a chain above the mine room, and then fell to the ground, away from Edmund. Haha, it's just a rabble. Edmund wiped the dust off his sword and didn't take it seriously. He had some skills, but that was all. Whether it was the magic pattern construction of the armor, the destructive defense of life alchemy, or his own combat skills, This group of people will never be able to compete with me if they practice for another 3 lifetimes. Lee Sight knew that conventional means alone would not suffice. Even if he was a major general, he was still a general, not an ordinary person. He was a very powerful person, and Shadowswan was naturally no match for him. These two gentlemen are just letting you. Don't think that you can talk nonsense, because you are a general of Yalin. When you come to the East Coast, even if you are a dragon, you have to be restrained. A few drops of blood dripped from Lee Sight's palm, and the tip of a sword slowly grew out of his flesh, splattering with blood. The flames in a mine room were swaying wildly and erratically. The powerful cursed weapon from 700 years ago, the Junlin sword, pierced the flesh and broke out of the shell. The cargo for the big job has been found. After eating the meat in Hei Fan's mouth, there is no reason to spit it out. In the basic sword skills manual published by the Adventurers Guild, the preface to the introductory chapter contains this sentence. For a rookie who knows nothing, a sword must be the best weapon. When you reach a certain level, you will throw away your sword and look for suitable equipment. If you have become a master, the sword must be the best weapon. The fact is that people in the Western continent, whether they are in the palace or on the road, can more or less use swords because they are the most versatile. Lee Sight is no exception. He can easily use 3 simple moves and 2 to kill people. The mine room is filled with cold, rusty iron. The tip of the sword pierced the palm of his hand, tearing open a huge gap, and blood flowed like a stream. Just the slightest edge of the sword tip caused strange phenomena in the surroundings. There was a dark wind blowing in the large open platform. The torches on the wall slots flickered on and off, and the biting cold made people feel like they had fallen into an ice cave. It is not a drop in the room temperature in the physical sense, but an invisible wind that penetrates the soul. The cold, murderous intention of death lingers like a lingering curse. This weird scene made Edmund's pores tighten. His instinct like a beast made him act before thinking. He had to cut off the beard not before the sword was completely unsheathed. Pirates in fancy braids. Edmund was far from a reckless man and was extremely knowledgeable. Whether it is within the past 2,000 years or the ancient era when history is incompletely recorded, people with sinister intentions will create evil instruments and use people as sheaths. There are many amazing and talented people among these builders, and the things they create will be eternal. The legacy lasts for thousands of years, and this pirate is obviously the carrier of some kind of powerful cursed weapon. Even the armor that was covered like a can and weighed 70 or 80 kilograms again. Edmund's agility even far surpassed that of Xiadi and Swan. He took 1 step and was 2 meters away. In less than a breath, he was already close. He was so fast that he had just dodged over. His vision remained and even formed an ink phantom. The broad-bladed sword fell from the sky and slashed at Lee Sight's left shoulder. It goes away, destroying dry matter, splitting mountains and rocks, and its power is unparalleled. Xiadi still hadn't calmed down from his rage, and his weapon had been broken, but he wanted to kill the military police officer by any means necessary. Edmund was currently on the minecar transport track. There is still a pile of wind-breath stone raw or left on a minecart. This pile of raw or may not have been transported because the purity content is too low and it is basically just gravel. The total weight of the cart was 600 to 700 kilograms. Xiadi pushed the minecart with all his strength and rushed towards Edmund under the support of the inertia of the rollers. There was a loud bang and smoke and dust scattered. Edmund was hit and staggered a step, but it was only 1 step, and he immediately stabilized his body and nothing happened. Obsessive. The sword slashed away fiercely, the sound of piercing the air like thunder piercing the ears. The metal structure on the edge of the minecart was dry and cracked as soon as it came into contact, and the entire minecart exploded into pieces. Among the flying rocks in the sky, Edmund could clearly see Xiadi's figure. He was holding a pickaxe and aiming at his head. Gloria, who was seriously injured, could not help at all, and Swan's thief skills were useless at this moment. But the difference in strength between Yalin's generals and Xiadi is not the slightest bit. How can these mining tools be used to kill people? Edmund didn't bother to block it at all. He put his right hand back, ready to strike, and was about to pierce Xiadi with his sword. Click, click, click. 3 extremely cold ice cones, exuding cold energy, flew out from the corners of the mine room, landed on Edmund's back, exploded, and spread on the extremely cold ice threads, interrupting his attack and causing his body to stagnate slightly. The pickaxe was planted on Edmund's head, but the sound of gold and iron was heard. Xiadi's tiger's mouth was numb, but it was not in vain. A hole was opened and blood spilled out. Edmund shook his armor, cracking the ice and falling to the ground. He looked back and saw that it was the spell cast by the mysterious man. Edmund himself did not know who this mysterious man was. The superior only said that he was a felon in the Empire. Following Edmund's cold gaze, the slender figure wrapped in a burqa couldn't help but take 2 steps back in fear. To put it bluntly, all of this only happened in the blink of an eye. In fact, Li's sight didn't need them to buy time at all. The Junlin sword was infinitely useful, and from the first moment its edge emerged, it had been blessed with extremely terrifying power. "Where are you looking?" Li's sight swung his sword across the abdomen of Edmund's armor. The power of the sword was so terrifying that it burned away and created a hole, emitting a strange black smoke. If Edmund hadn't reacted in time and taken a few steps back, he would have been disemboweled. The Junlin sword has been held in Li's sight's left hand. Although it is less flexible than the other hand, the left hand and the sword are one and cannot be separated. This sword, it was a gift from the Emperor to express his grace and power. It has an extremely exquisite appearance and shows the magnificent magnanimity of the world. Even though hundreds of years have passed, it is as if it was newly cast. When the sword edge touched, the light was distorted and swallowed up like a dense heat wave, as if it was cut by its curse and resentment, and the space began to escape. Under the aura, it is truly like a king coming, and all things kneel down. Li's sight himself became like a pendant. Under the pressure of this sword, his sense of existence was infinitely reduced. What did I think it was? Edmund's mind was horrified. He was shocked for a moment, and then he came back to his senses. Li's sight looked like he couldn't even hold a sword, and his body was full of flaws. He was as ridiculous as a jobless loser in the Adventurers Guild. This sword is indeed weird, but if it can't hit you, what's the use? Die! Edmund no longer had any intention of insulting and joking, and began to get serious. The magic pattern construction on the armor began to operate the special power. The life alchemy brought terrifying physical fitness at the cost of lifespan. And in the Imperial arena, how can the superb skills honed countless times be compared to those of pirates who plunder merchant ships? Seeing Edmund's sudden surge in momentum, Swan threw the 2 daggers at the weak parts of his eyes. Edmund just waved his hand, and all of them bounced away. The next scene begins with a display of superb swordsmanship to kill Li's sight, who poses the greatest threat. Careful! The seriously injured Gloria used all her strength to shout out 2 words, but she was defeated by Edmund's unparalleled sword skills. Edmund's arms changed like flowing water. In an instant, he had already struck 19 swords. The strong wind that exploded with him as the center directly blew out almost all the torches in the mine room. The sky was dark, and the sand and rocks were flying. It was not a dazzling display at all. 19 stages of slashing. Each sword was so powerful that it was enough to cut all 4 limbs into minced flesh. The shadow of the sword is like a violent storm, and the sharp edge is like a stream of light in the sky. There is no way to retreat or avoid it. For Edmund, whose swordsmanship was already at an advanced level, the moves Li's sight had practiced were like a beginner's tutorial. It's over. Gloria thought so. Because Li's sight didn't have any starting moves, he was just like a fish, and he would explode into blood mist in less than a second, without even a chance of serious injury. The overwhelming clanging sound was about to explode the eardrums, and the sparks intertwined by the swords instantly turned the dark mine room into daylight. Li's sight just held the sword slanted in front of his chest, and all 19 slashes were deflected. Edmund's arms exploded with blood, which overflowed from the gaps in the armor. This is impossible. Gloria couldn't understand it all. Curse, resentment. 19 ghost figures come from the void, appearing suddenly and disappearing suddenly. Edmund Rao is a major general of the Syrian military police, but how can he kill the 32 radiant knights who brought the Empress to dominate the continent? Even their insignificant how come? Edmund's hands were trembling, and the power of blocking was not something a living thing could possess. The blood-red runes of the alchemy of life flowed rapidly, converging on his shattered and fractured arms, forcing him to continue. The 3 incomparable swords slashed out in an instant, attacking Lysight's head, chest, and abdomen. The 3 faceless ghosts suddenly appeared, but they were just phantoms in the illusory mist, holding the king's sword. Dang, dang, dang. All disintegrated. The ghost suddenly disappeared, as if it had never appeared. This time, one of Edmund's arms was directly broken and twisted, and the elbow joint was completely shattered. Click, click, and the alchemy of life forcefully pulled it back again. Even Edmund was panting heavily and had no idea how to start. This cursed weapon was so powerful that it was unimaginable. Lysight finally felt relieved. Edmund was not so fierce that he couldn't even defeat the king's landing sword. He was able to obtain this sword thanks to an enemy he had 4 years ago. Otherwise, he would be in trouble today. Thanks to my enemy's Junlin's sword, not only did I not be cursed to death, but I was also given a permanent talisman. Edmund was not the most powerful person Lysight had ever slaughtered, but he could still be ranked in the top 5. So, I'm going to work as a military policeman in Alanya, and I'll be as good as a lieutenant general. The offensive reversed. Lysight rushed forward and struck a sword in the air. Edmund's sword moves were perfected, and he could block them effortlessly. But the Junlin sword in Lysight's hand was not a phantom, but the real thing. The curse and resentment on the blade was a kind of sharpness from the netherworld. Edmund's sword was directly cut open by the curse. Black smoke was quickly burned from it, and it immediately broke in half. Lysight swung his sword again. Cut the air. Swing the sword. Cut the air. Edmund's movement skills were extremely superb. He only had the broken sword in his hand and did not dare to attack rashly. He just avoided it. Even so, Lysight's sword strikes were all in vain. His sword skills were enough to make him a silver-level adventurer, but the opponent was Major General Yalin. The runes on your face are probably the alchemy of life. The effectiveness will slowly be exhausted, and sooner or later will be worn down. Xiadi took a short knife from Swan's hand, and then just had to block his movement. When Lysight stabbed him with his sword, the game was over. A huge ice cone exploded over again. Edmund waved his arm to block, shattering them all, but his strength was no longer as strong as before. When Lysight struck with another sword, he almost missed it, and his shoulder armor was scratched to a point, and it instantly cracked. As Xiadi and Swan surrounded them with knives, he understood that he was not dealing with one person, but 4. There is no way he can save himself. Even if you take the person away, there are still pursuers coming to the door. The importance of this person is kept secret even from me. Yalin Shangfeng attaches great importance to it. You can hide for a while. What will happen next? With Yalin national power, even if you hide to the end of the world, the northern border of the north, the far east of the far east, it has no meaning. Now, it is just me chasing you. Kill me. It will only replace you with a stronger one. 2 choices. One is that I let you go, and the other is... Edmund knew exactly what these desperados were after and continued to add. I don't know what the people on your side have promised you. A golden dragon? A privateering license? A powerful noble with a fiefdom? If you just stop here, it will be a great achievement. I will report to the commander of the military police. No matter what the crime is, all the Orchid Gendarmerie Guard were taken down. Everything in the past was wiped out. Entering the palace, serving the emperor, being granted a wife and a son, being prosperous, and rising through the ranks, isn't it better than being in exile overseas? There will still be pursuers. Edmund was like crazy, giving both kindness and power, and continued to roar. There will be stronger ones coming. Even the Sword King of Aram. Just calm down. Think about it. A completely different life. Lee Sight took a breath. It was a shame that he didn't bring Claude in, otherwise Claude would definitely turn against him on the spot. Seeing that the three of them were hesitant. The mysterious black-robed man was trembling and didn't know what to do, and stayed away from the three people who looked very dangerous. Don't believe his lies. You really need to calm down. These pursuers don't know the identity of the target. Anyone who knows about it will be killed. How can you not know the face of the Imperial Eagle Dog? After speaking, Gloria coughed violently, fearing that Lee Sight and the other three would make a stupid decision. Brother, it's not that I don't want to. You may not know that the things I have committed cannot be written off. In your files, it seems that I was one of the masterminds of the riot in the northern prison 10 years ago. Lee Sight said calmly, in a sense, he can be regarded as a veteran in the underground world of the Western continent. Swan was so shocked that he could hardly close his jaw. The riot had a far-reaching impact. It was the beginning of today's chaos in the Western continent. How could the background of the captain of the black sailing ship be so terrifying? Xiadi was not surprised. She had known about it for a long time. Fuck. Edmund laughed wildly. In this case, he could only fight hard. What no one expected was, Edmund still had a backup plan. His strength had not yet reached the end. After removing all the weight, all the armor fell off and cracked. The runes of life alchemy spread all over his body, and his muscles exploded like a beast. The speed and strength, which were already exaggerated, were elevated to even more terrifying heights. Even though he only had a broken sword in his hand, he was no longer obsessed with killing Lee Sight. He first killed everyone else in the mine, and then faced off with Lee Sight in a life-and-death showdown. In an instant, Edmund's speed was extremely fast, and he was ready to take out the rude Xiadi and operate first. It's really killing me. Lee Sight had to accept the level of involution of the Yalan military police. This level could only be compared to that of Major General, but in Baima, it was the level of the Royal Guards. Xiadi is also good at speed. Previously, he could not break through the defense and had a close fight with Edmund, but Edmund went crazy and his broken sword flashed into streaks of black light. Just the sword wind cut off a corner of Xiadi's raincoat. Next, there was a burst of lightning and a thunder gun shot out and shot towards Edmund. At this time, Edmund's reflexes were like those of a wild animal. He quickly grabbed a chain and dodged the thunderbolt in the air. The wall was scorched black by lightning. Caruso and Claude were covered in blood and killed 50 or 60 people, plus a school officer. Now it's not a pair of 4, but a pair of 6. Edmund did not expect that his burial place would be in such a desolate mine, and that a lifetime of conquest would lead to such an end. Unparalleled sword skills. Edmund spun around in the air, and the broken sword sharply turned down in an attempt to take Swan's head. Lee Sight stepped forward to resist, and a ghost reflected the sword. Edmund seemed to have lost his sense of pain, and his arm was broken again. Without even a frown, he shook his hand back to normal, and then rushed towards the mysterious man in black robes. That speed is so fast that even if he dies, he will be buried with someone who can influence the direction of the world, so that his life's hard work will not be in vain. The frost and cold air from the spell formation on the fingertips of the mysterious black-robed man was like a dam bursting, making his movements slow and stiff. Shadowswan's short sword intercepted it at the same time, and Caruso's thunder gun and Claude's sword energy were tightly locked. Followed by, completely block its movement. The King's Landing sword stabbed Edmund straight into the back. This sword, it pierced through the left side of Edmund's chest. His heart had been torn apart, and unparalleled curse power spread throughout his body. Just for a moment, then it flew into ashes and disappeared into smoke, turning into embers and being annihilated in the wind. The Junlin sword re-pierced Lee Sight's left arm in a strange way that was invisible to the naked eye. It's finally fucking over. Lee Sight breathed a long sigh of relief. He stared at the mysterious man in black robe. Do you want to test it? The enemy will be destroyed. Everyone in the mine room had a different expression. Lee Sight understood that this was far from the time to slack off. The big ones had not come yet. The pursuers had been completely eliminated, and there was no need to worry. However, the besiegers on the other side of Linden City were the heavyweights. On the way here, he heard Caruso say that not only is there eternity, there is also a man named Zahak among the demons of the sect. He is the person in charge of connecting Yalin to the summit. He is trained with the Damn Sword King of Yalin. He is a ruthless character among ruthless characters. I don't know General Fun and the others. Can't stand it. Since we are already on the same boat, there is no need to be secretive anymore. We must have complete trust. The journey on this trip is dangerous, and we must know who is lucky. Although Xiadi said this, she was just curious about the identity of the person in black robe. Although she was wearing an airtight hooded robe, she looked like a woman of 16 or 17 years old from the outline of her skeleton. This kind of thing could also be used against bare hands. Is the dragon-slaying emperor a threat? He walked quickly towards the man in black robe without putting down the short knife in his hand, ready to pull off the mask to see clearly. No, the Count must have explained that confidentiality is also part of the agreement. Not only is the balance promised by the Count, but when the matter comes to an end at the Port of Heaven, the contact will also contribute a large amount of money. Caruso stood in front without hesitation. Even though they had just lived and died together in a battle, these pirates were all lawless people. If they were to know their identities, they would definitely change. Did you say so? Swan was present at the time and understood that it was part of the agreement. He glanced at Lee Sight, not asking whether this was the case, but asking about Lee Sight's judgment. The atmosphere in the mine room, which had just calmed down, suddenly became a little more solemn. Claude sensed it keenly and was now on the pirate ship, standing in a pile with BlackSail and the others. Lee Sight had a lot of thoughts in his mind. He had indeed promised the Earl, but the verbal agreement had limited effectiveness. Will there be a heavy reward when he arrived at the Port of Heaven? He had an extremely terrifying thought. There were many opportunities on the ship. The man in black robe was still protecting him just now. Gloria, there must have been a bond of friendship along the way. These serious people are different from duplicitous pirates who gather from all over the country. They are people of love and loyalty. If they break their skin, how can they be used by themselves? Well, I did say that. We must get back to the ship as soon as possible. The only way from here to Secret Harbor is through Lavender Town. Every second counts. Lee Sight said calmly. Seeing what the captain said, Swan also gave up the idea. After more than 2 months, he knew that Lee Sight was a ruthless and thoughtful person. He would consider every judgment carefully and would not make random decisions. Can I still leave? Lee Sight asked Gloria. He was worthy of being a famous figure in the Adventurers Guild newspaper. Hard fist. She's now seriously injured. Edmund's sword skills cannot even withstand heroic adventurers. If it weren't for the King's Landing sword, there would have to be several people hanging in the mine room today. Gloria managed to stand upright while holding on to the wall and nodded, but blood overflowed from a wound on her waist and abdomen, dyeing the white shirt under the leather armor scarlet. There was also a large cut on her leg, which was not optimistic. Swan raised his eyebrows. It would take some time to return to the main road from here, and carrying burdens would slow down the speed. There should be a doctor on your ship, right? Caruso asked. Of course, all kinds of facilities and medicines are also available. Lee Sight thought about a solution. Gloria, this girl couldn't walk. She might have died when she got back to the ship, but the person had to be taken away. Although the mysterious man was wearing a black robe, he looked like a human being. The reason why this slender little girl is known to be a woman is because the growth of St. Maiden Mountain is quite impressive. This mysterious man must be obedient to Gloria and Caruso. As long as he controls these two people, he also controls the mysterious man, which is of great importance. We need to take a long-term approach. Okay, now we can only do emergency bandaging. Stop the bleeding first and hold on. Caruso tore off a few strands of cloth from his cloak and rode back with a bumpy ride. He didn't know if Gloria could hold on. Seeing that Claude was tall and tall, Lee Sight asked him to carry Gloria on his back. Caruso was extremely tired from the continuous battles and ran all the way to fight back and forth. He just relied on the church's demonic will to hold on. At this time, Claude looked very depressed His body was covered with the blood of the military police, and he didn't know what he was thinking. Claude, carry her on your back. Lee's sight patted Claude on the shoulder. From now on, we will be our brothers, and you will be part of the core team. Your men are not ordinary sailors. They could be naval gunners. I will take special care of you. Claude nodded. That was all. Half an hour later, a group of 7 people returned to the road. It was almost dusk now, and the blood-red setting sun was faintly ominous. Claude's regular troops killed several gendarmes and took good care of the horses tied to the roadside. Can the people on your boat take responsibility? Caruso couldn't help but ask. The next step is the last difficulty. As long as he gets through it, the sea is so vast, and he can escape. More than just being top-notch, all of my people are dragons among men. Thinking of Micah Archer Lane and other goods, Lee's sight set a little against his will, took out the wooden box, broke off the sealing wax, and the purple mist swirled out, and the strands of silk threads were woven into a flesh and blood raven. Spread out his wings and soared into the sky, flying towards the secret port, and disappeared after a while. Walk, Lee's sight shouted, and he could only leave it to the invincible General Fun. Suddenly the horses' hooves hunted and headed straight for the coast. The other side, Secret Harbor. On the deck, more than 100 pirates were all silent, because the backbone of the ship had their own thoughts and their expressions were quite gloomy. The weather is not optimistic. It is already evening, but under the heavy clouds, it seems that it is already night, and there will be a storm soon. Wren and Archer have disembarked the ship with the 20th person, and are responsible for early warning and enemy detection outside Linden City. Finn paced back and forth on the deck. Counting the time, it was almost 3 days since Lee's sight and the others went there. There was no news. However, Zahak had already targeted them. With a crow, Finn looked at the sky outside the cave. The raven flew back, hovered on the back of his hand, and then turned into a purple mist, sinking into his fingers. Oakes, who was sitting in the corner, suddenly opened his eyes with murderous intent. Attention everyone, the winchman and the windlassman are on standby on the ship, ready to set sail at any time. The rest of the personnel will act according to the deployment. An extremely strange sight appeared on Fun. He turned sideways and slowly walked out a man who looked exactly like him and wore the same clothes. He even had the same monocle. Finn got off the boat first. After a few words, everyone went out. Morrison followed closely behind, flipped over the side of the ship, and landed firmly on the trestle at a height of more than 10 meters. Oakes, who was carrying a huge sword, also smashed down, causing the trestle to creak. Pirates number 70 and 80 poured down the gangway. They were all carrying flaming scimitars and various sharp weapons. Desperados from all over the world gathered at the same time, and the momentum was extremely terrifying. You 3, as long as you are an outsider here, you will be killed. Although Fawn is sitting on the ship, he can separate the spirit body, but the farther away from him, the worse the effect. The limit is 50 miles, and he can't focus on 3 things. Woolman has to keep an eye on this. You still need to say it. Woolman was very interested in killing the Arameans. Finn leaned on the guardrail of the ship, closed his eyes, and his thoughts flew towards the spirit body, which was extremely mysterious. In Linden City, Manglan Hotel, Zahak's mood fluctuated like a roller coaster throughout the afternoon. Around 2 o'clock, the military police who went to a secret port lost contact, and the senior non-commissioned officer sent to check later did not reply. At 3:30, I received the news. Edmund has captured Gloria and the target of his pursuit, and will soon come to Linden City to join forces and return to the imperial capital. And now, Caruso and Claude killed dozens of gendarmes, but 2 of them had their morale broken and escaped. They used the falcons raised by the gendarmes to report that Edmund was alive or dead, and that the target might reach the coast through Lavender Town. It was almost nightfall now, and if Edmund had brought people over quickly in the first place, they would have arrived long ago. There is only one possibility. Edmund, that kind of man, is actually dead. The 2.5-meter-tall leopard man couldn't believe it. He knew that he had come to the rescue, and he shouldered the extra-large knife weighing more than 300 kilograms. It sounded like he was going to intercept him on the road to Lavender Town. Only I took action myself. Zahak's tone was calm. He had laid a dragnet. The official port of Linden City was airtight, and the other secret ports were also patrolled. Thinking of the team of military police who lost contact at noon, Zahak had an idea. Now go to the Admiral's house and ask the Admiral to send troops to the main road of Lavender Town. It is said that it is the command of the commander of the Imperial Military Police. Due to legal constraints, he will second some troops here. With a cold expression on his face, Zahak stood up and ordered the YS girl. Although many of the soldiers stationed here are just related people who want to brush up their resumes, there are also elites they brought with them. All means will lead to the same goal in the end. Even in internal politics, it is important to make friends at a distance and attack closely. Within the same organization, every colleague at the same level is an enemy and a competitor that hinders one from climbing to the highest position in the current organization. People in other agencies have to unite with each other to deal with competitors in friendly departments. Often the people they have under them are not all their own, and the people who are stuffed into friendly agencies are the most capable. Trustworthy. Only in this way can they operate flexibly in the Imperial Court, and the iron barrels can slowly erode the upper-level power and continuously consolidate it. However, almost everyone with skill would do this, leading to murderous plots within the Imperial Court. Zahak must take care of the people brought in by his political allies and let them brush up their resumes. Of course, he must also fight tough battles. He has about 200 highly qualified soldiers here. It's urgent. Let's set out immediately. Zahak immediately set off and took the leopard man with him. Although this leopard man only had the rank of colonel, but because he had no military merit, his actual level was not much worse than Edmund. After quick preparations, Zahak led the gendarmerie team out on the street. Along the way, the people of Linden City cast hostile glances. They felt uncomfortable with foreigners running amok in their homeland, and they dare not speak out in anger. 10 minutes later, it's almost night on the coast, and the winter monsoon is extremely biting. At the fork of the main road 8 miles outside Linden City, there are many trees and weeds swaying in the wind, creating a chilly atmosphere. The mighty team of 200 people all held torches, illuminating everything within a radius of several hundred meters. From here, you could take a branch road to Lavender Town and another town, or you can take a rammed earth path deep in another branch road to go to a secret port patrolled by the missing team at noon. When Zahak arrived here with his troops, all the patrolling military police here have been killed, and the death conditions of more than a dozen corpses are horrific. It seems that someone is proficient in anatomy skills. The ulna and radius bones of the arms of several corpses were split from the middle. This kind of chop is extremely weird, and the parts were also like spare parts of ribs hung on hooks in a butcher's shop. The blood had been drained out very well, leaving only fresh meat. It was extremely weird and unheard of. The rest were disemboweled alive, with claw marks on their bodies, as if they had been killed by ferocious beasts. It's kind of scary, holy shit. A gust of wind blew, the torches swayed, and the leopard man couldn't help but complain, this ghost place on the East Coast is really evil. It's the person who takes care of Caruso and the others. He's quite capable. Zahak looked at the branch road leading to the Sea Cliff cave more than 10 miles away and seemed to remember something. Marcus actually really has some kind of divine power? The location of that place was clearly the direction where the bloody hand stretched out under the petition umbrella tree. Zahak had already made up his mind. He and his group were going to intercept Caruso and the others. Marcus was naturally stationed here. To be on the safe side, he sent 100 people to the secret port to support them. Among them were several senior non-commissioned officers who could become an official. From now on, the troops will be divided into 2 groups. The news said that Gloria and the target were caught, but they must have been rescued by the responders. Zahak led the remaining people to continue to Lavender Town to intercept people. At this moment, Secret Harbor, Micah woke up Fun, who was thinking too much. The people Archer brought back came back with 2 reports, saying that a group of heavily armored priests and a 5-meter-tall giant were coming here. Damn it, Woolman never expected that he would be facing someone from the Vatican. Fun also had no intention of using his spirit body to support the other two groups, and the plan could not keep up with the changes. It seemed that something had happened on the site side. Those people actually locked up the secret port and concluded that this ship was the one to take over. "Uncle, I like to kill people in the church the most." Haywood mimicked Woolman's words. "Don't worry, I have this thing in my hand." Finn took out a sack from his arms, which contained the fragments of the underworld steel with magic sealing stones. Although he had never tried it before, he did not dare to try it easily. If he retreated 10,000 steps and was defeated, if he used the fragments of the steel as a medium to cast death spiritual arts, unless the person on the other side is the high priest of the eternal sect, he is not an opponent. Michael was in awe. This warlock was obviously super powerful, but too cautious and too stable. At the same time, the other side, Zahak had already marched for some distance on the main road to Lavender Town. This road was built along the coast and gradually penetrated inland. At this time, the air was a bit muggy and a heavy rain was about to fall. Thick clouds covered the celestial bodies in the starry sky, and the visibility was so low that it seemed like it was midnight. At this time, screams came from the troops in front of the longitudinal line. Zahak immediately ordered to stop advancing. "What's wrong?" Zahak rode to the front and saw a horse on the ground whose belly had been disemboweled and its contents sprayed all over the floor. The throat of the soldier riding on the horse had also been scratched. He was not dead yet, but blood was spurting out intermittently. He is already in a dying state and cannot be saved. I didn't see it clearly. A black shadow rushed over and disappeared again. It looked like a giant wolf. The soldier who was being questioned was frightened by the scene just now and spoke awkwardly. "What a giant wolf! It must be a werewolf from the Western Plateau." The leopard man also came to the front, and he was probably one of the murderers who just killed the patrolling military policeman. The black shadow suddenly came out of the forest again. Ren kept the strategy in mind, killing the small characters directly and delaying the big fish as long as he could. If he couldn't buy time, he joined a main force of Morrison and Oaks. This time Ren was not so lucky. Zahak was right in front of the army. In an instant, he drew his sword and slashed, and the blood-red sword energy roared like a dragon. Ren stretched out his arm armor to block, and his elbow joint was almost dislocated due to the shock. There was also a scratch on the steel armor. "You are the apprentice of Sword King Aram, right?" Ren didn't dare to wait long. Human foot strength was nothing compared to his own. No matter how strong Zahak was, if he ran into the forest, he wouldn't be able to catch up. He whistled and ambushed a dozen pirates behind the troops, not to kill, but to harass and weaken them. These pirates slaughtered a few people in the rear and immediately ran into the woods. Ren himself galloped forward on the road on all fours. It was time for the real macho to slaughter. Chase! Zahak understood that the situation had now become a life-and-death battle of annihilation. The big man with skull tattoos, who had just been on board the ship less than 10 days ago, took out his ears and leaned down with his head close to the ground. "The people are here. Master Run, and a large army of troops and horses about 2 miles long." The tattooed man stood up and shouted urgently. His ear was amazing. Fun's phantom nodded, but he couldn't stay long. The coast was in danger, so he could only provide support. Archer, who was searching for the enemy, must be returning to the ship soon. The 3 giants of BlackSail's combat power gathered in the woods beside the road, along with Morrison and Oaks. About 80 pirates were also hiding on the left and right sides of the forest, and they could be caught off guard if they appeared at any time. Fun roughly calculated the distance from Lavender Town to here. From the moment the Raven came back, it should be almost there. Lee's sight and the others were probably intercepted by the pursuers, or they went to rescue the boxes opened elsewhere. Regardless of whether they win the battle or not, they can only rely on their own side. If they win, they will be in a battle-damaged state after experiencing a tough battle. If they don't win, they will need more support here. There's something going on in the secret port. It's someone from the Holy See. I'll leave it to you. Fun twisted 2 strands of cursed threads into a sharp, thin rope with a spiral structure, like a clothesline wire. With the movement of his fingers, it quickly weaved into an invisible giant net in the middle of the road, laying out a terrifying, murderous intention. As the backbone of the Pedin National Academy of Arcane Arts, Fun's level far exceeds that of the third-rate warlocks in the Adventurers Guild who memorize formulas and templates. His magic is no longer limited to form and has reached a state of perfection. The power of spells is not only used to trigger media. Energy can even materialize. Ren's feet were so fast that his limbs flew by, far ahead of Zahak's pursuing troops. In less than a minute, he had already rushed into the woods where Oaks was. Less than 20 seconds later, Zahak's troops rushed in. This scene was too bloody and violent. The dozen or so cavalrymen who rushed over at first were at high speed while galloping. Under the sharp magic net, they had no time to even scream, and they died inexplicably. People and horses were cut into countless small cubes, and the cut surfaces were as flat and smooth as mirrors. Then the contents burst out, blood surged, and the entire intersection became a hell on earth with a fishy smell. Only then did the rear troops react, but for a moment the inertia was unable to stop them. In extreme fear, the number 20 men and horses again hit the giant net and were torn apart, scattered all over the place. The pirate sailors who were ambushing BlackSail were surprised. Of course, there were rumors and gossips on the ship. I had heard that the first mate was a very powerful warlock. Now it turns out that he is even more powerful. He is already at the level of a palace warlock, and even worse. And the elite military police of Alanya were surrounded and killed by a group of pirates. All the troops in the rear were in chaos. The horses neighed and turned around. The formation was completely broken, and panic spread. A war is far from just about dead soldiers on both sides. If 1/3 of the troops are killed and they still don't waver, they can already be said to be iron armies. A bunch of losers. Zahak rushed straight towards the giant net, drew his sword, and slashed 10 times in an instant. The blood-red sword light burst out, cutting off all the cursed threads, and followed the slight arc of the threads falling. Zahak's eyes were like a falcon, and his terrifying fighting instinct was like a killing machine. A sharp sword energy had already been slashed out subconsciously, and the power of vertically bursting several big trees was not reduced at all. It was as powerful as breaking bamboo, and it accurately hit the trees in the forest. Finn, the mantra's web was torn apart, which caused a certain degree of chaos. After receiving another heavy blow, Fun's phantom dispersed directly and turned into a purple mist without a trace. Zahak's eyelids twitched. He was very knowledgeable. This was just a spirit body, and its clones had such terrifying spell power. This was a master-level figure, and Marcus was also in trouble. Killing more than 30 military policemen at the beginning would have boosted the morale of the pirates, but Zahak hesitated as soon as he took action. The momentum was too terrifying, and his skills were incredible. He was Lieutenant General of the Allen Military Police, a big shot. Oaks understood that he and Morrison must kill all these people. Now the coast is also blocked by the Holy See. List and the others are exhausted. This is the main front. Once it collapses, Zahak will divide the reinforcements into 2 groups, completely finished. The BlackSail pirates' rules for dividing the spoils are not arbitrary. Of the total proceeds of 300 gold dragons, 50% will be used as public funds, and the rest will be divided equally. If there are more than 300 gold dragons, 200 gold dragons will be used as public funds, and the rest will be divided equally. If you earn less, you can retain the backbone. If you earn more, you can stabilize the crew and make the backbone more profitable. Not every time is a big deal. There are always times when the northwest wind blows. The reason why the threshold is set at 300 is because the average price of stolen goods sold by merchant ships trading in the Western continent and the Far East is at this position. The so-called public funds, home maintenance, and standing supplies are all small parts, but the money earned by sailors working their lives is the big part. Once there is a large shipment of more than 300 gold dragons, the backbone will have to vote to determine the additional dividends for the sailors. At the end of the day, the starting price is gold dragons. If gold dragons can't get along, then they're still considered pirates. There's only one principle of justice on a pirate ship. Whoever has the ability will get more. The rules of all ships are transparent, and BlackSail is no exception. Finally, there are two different levels of life safety and treatment between being in a powerful pirate group with a backbone system and being in a miscellaneous group. Only winning is allowed, no defeat is allowed. Each person starts with one golden dragon. A military policeman's ear counts as 100 silver coins, and a non-commissioned officer's head plus armband counts as 2 golden dragons. Oak said coldly. As for the leopard man and Zahak, needless to say, these people are no opponents. He just said a word. The cold-blooded madness of the pirates is clearly revealed. These days, they already know that the black sailboat requires wine and meat, and is worthy of the reputation of one of the most fierce pirate groups on the East Coast. Was the concept of 100 silver coins. According to the salary of the Navy of the Principality of Bima, an ordinary sailor has to endure hardships and work hard as a cow or a horse, and it takes almost a year to earn this amount. Prostitutes with good looks and figures charge 20 to 30 copper coins for a single session, which is enough to play more than 200 times in a row until they vomit blood. Killing a military policeman will last 2 years. Killing a non-commissioned officer will last 4 years. In this world, a year is only 16 months. Among the pirates, one cyclops with a scarred left eye and a cloudy blue pupil was a ruthless character. After hearing this, he couldn't help but walked onto the road quickly with a machete in hand. While the military policeman was still in shock, he raised the knife and stabbed a military policeman directly in the abdomen. After twisting it for a few times and pulling out hard, the body fell off the horse. With extraordinary skill, he got on the horse and was led by a military police officer. BlackSail gathered many remnants of previously organized pirates in Linden City. This one-eyed dragon was once the helmsman of a ship, and he also had about 20 brothers under his command. He also rushed forward, regardless of his life or death. The big man with the skull tattoo also rushed out with a big axe and a war cry. All the remaining pirates let out strange howls and war cries, and charged into the enemy's formation in the most brutal intimidation way. Fighting on horseback and without horseback are two different concepts. When these rigorously trained regular soldiers calmed down, Oakes understood that these pirates were no match. They must be kept in extreme fear, like the most cowardly merchant ships. Encountered the most cold-blooded pirate. Oakes himself held the extra-large sword and leapt up to a height of 4 to 5 meters. The 300-pound giant sword only made a single slash, and the 2 cavalrymen and their horses split apart from the diagonal position. Due to the sword's edge, the airflow was turbulent like a strong wind, and the plasma exploded out and splashed everywhere. Oakes's physique was taller than the military policeman on horseback. He stood like an iron tower in the enemy's formation, and the military policemen around him were frightened. Rin also came out of the woods, not killing people, but specifically disemboweling horses to create an advantage for sailors. Under the leadership of BlackSail's second mate and bosun, the pirates became even more aggressive. With their overall strength even lower, the infantry actually blocked the cavalry and killed them. You're the boss, right? The 2.5-meter-tall leopard man, Piapan, knew that he had to kill this big man. It also had an extra-large weapon, and the extra-large knife. The emperor slayed the dragon to conquer the world. In Syria, people talk about martial arts and talents. Empire Arena once a month. In mid-September of the year, the annual mainland martial arts competition is one of the most exciting events in the Western continent. Even though Piapan is not the runner-up in the Continental Martial Arts Competition, it is held once a month, and its gold content is extremely terrifying. If you perform well in the Imperial Arena, you will directly enter the upper echelons of the military and rise rapidly. Piapan has no military exploits and is also a senior colonel. He only has one meritorious service and will be promoted to brigadier general immediately. As a runner-up, his strength, body skills, and combat skills are all required to reach the extreme, and he also needs to make further progress, otherwise he will not be able to fight in the arena. The extra-large sword slashed horizontally and vertically twice, like a giant stone hitting him. Oaks blocked it effortlessly, and the hum of the huge steel clash was loud enough to burst the eardrums. No one dared to get close to the two of them. Both sides were equipped with powerful and heavy weapons, and the soldiers would die in one hit. Oaks violently drew his sword and slashed at his neck. Piapan raised his sword vertically, sparks flying, and the place where the blade touched under the great force turned faintly red like a soldering iron. Piapan was barely able to hold on, and veins appeared one after another in the muscles of his arms that exploded. This shark's strength was terrifying. It's quite powerful. Piapan immediately gave up the fight. Although he was big, he was in no way bulky. He was extremely violent, flexible, and with a stooped body, he turned around and cut in a big way, using all his strength to remove Oak's legs. The door panel was slashed with a large sword, which almost bounced Piapan's sword away, causing him to take several steps back. The wind of the sword also cut into his chest and tore a gash that oozed blood. Piapan's right hand was trembling slightly, and he forced it to hold the extra-large knife. Oaks was silent. "Is that all you have, Piapan?" Although Zahak had no anger on his face, he was extremely irritable in his heart. The air military policeman was actually killed by a group of pirates and turned upside down. Even if he successfully brought the target back, he would be disgraced. Piapan's hair stood on end, and he did not dare to speak in the face of the rebuke. Oaks slashed at him again, but he was still defeated and took several steps back. Waste! Zahak's eyes were cold, and if he really wanted to do it, he would draw his sword and execute Oaks. The hazy and sultry sky finally ushered in the violent storm that had accumulated enough. The sky with rolling black clouds was filled with electric light. With a burst of thunder, the whole world was lit up like the sun, only for a moment. Boom! Boom! Two flying knives appeared from the forest. Zahak had no intention of supporting Piapan and flicked the flying knives down with his sword. It looks effortless, though. Only Zahak understood that its power was so fierce, like a cannonball being fired, that not only this shark man, but also masters were ambushing in the forest. He looked in the direction where the flying knife was thrown, but there was no sign of anyone. The big picture is what matters. Morrison wants to lure out the most ruthless Zahak and let Oaks kill all the people in the team. He changes goals. Boom! The flying knife burst was so powerful that it was like a siege crossbow. It penetrated two military policemen in succession, and the latter one was directly nailed to a tree. Both of them died suddenly on the spot. Boom! Two more military policemen were shot through. Zahak was shocked. If this continues, he will definitely lose. Morrison took the initiative to show up, standing on the edge of the forest. Half of his face was burned and disfigured, and there were more than a dozen diagonal scratches, which was extremely vicious. He took out another flying knife from the strap on his chest, but made no move. He just held in his hand, stared at Zahak coldly, and then took 2 steps back. The meaning is obvious. If you don't come and kill me, I will kill all your people here one by one. Zahak had no choice at all and rode towards Morrison. However, Zahak's warhorse has followed him on expeditions for several years, destroying several cult strongholds, large and small, and has never lost control. No matter how hard Zahak pulled him, the warhorse screamed in fear and did not dare to move in that direction. Zahak knew who he wanted to arrest this time. Under the ruthless rules of Aram's political circles, he understood that if he went back without anyone, the rest of his life would be ruined. His face was completely cold. He showed the awareness that a high-ranking Aram official should have. Click! Cut it down with one sword. And if the enemy is timid in front of battle, don't do it. The horse's head was severed, blood splattered, and Zahak fell firmly to the ground. Piapan, don't you still have the alchemy of life in you? Don't embarrass me. I will kill the strongest person here. Zahak's eyes were cold and cold. Even if it was a trap or an ambush, he had to go and rush towards the dark forest. Although it's a bit overwhelming, Piapan also made a decision. Once the alchemy of life is activated, he will spend the rest of his life as a monster, and there is no turning back. The blood-red runes on his back swelled and spread all over his body. His hair also turned blood-red and exploded. Speed, strength, resilience, and explosion have been elevated to a terrifying dimension. This 2.5-meter body was incredibly fast. He jumped up to 7 meters high in one leap. His body spun wildly in the air, and the big sword spun around like crazy. The air was heated by the air-piercing force, and violent winds fell from the sky, slashed towards Oaks. An extremely dull, loud noise. Even Oaks couldn't bear it. The weight of the sword itself, the force of the blow due to the surge of life runes, gravity, and inertia added up to more than 5 tons. Oak's knees began to bend faintly. At this time, a heavy rain fell from the sky. Ren, who had slaughtered all the horses on the road, licked the blood on his paws and looked at Oaks. At this time, the heavy rain was pouring down, and the pieces were smashing on the ground. Ren laughed wildly, and his bloody mouth was extremely frightening. "Brother, God is going to kill you." Ren was threatening Piapan, knowing very well what Oaks was capable of. It was difficult for ordinary sharks to survive on land for a long time. Even if there were sharks who came all the way from the Sea of Mirrors to do trade, they would go into the water regularly and not dare to stay for a long time. Oaks was able to bear it all with his terrifying physical fitness, which was equivalent to always having altitude sickness. Cutting people down was almost anaerobic exercise, and he couldn't exert his full strength at all. Piapan is dead. At this time, the second officer of BlackSail is invincible. As the gills on Oaks's chest, abdomen, and back opened and closed, oxygen surged, and his limbs were filled with strength. Boom! The sword was slashed out, and the pure force crushed him. Piapan was sent flying more than 10 meters away with the knife, and he hit a tree. His internal organs were injured, and he vomited a mouthful of blood. Deep in the forest, the rain fell in torrents. Zahak chased Morrison, and after a while, he came to a flat land with sparse trees, from which he could overlook the East China Sea. His hair was completely wet, and he was holding a blood-red sword. The pressure from the palace and the fighting on the east bank made his spirit stretch to the limit. With just his murderous intention, he drove away all the birds and beasts in the forest. Morrison also stopped. It was far enough here that Zahak could no longer affect the situation of the battle. The storm was violent and the waves were raging. The thin line between life and death. "Are you going to use that toy-like thing to chop me?" Morrison spread his hands with no weapons in his hands. He sneered and tried to calm Zahak's mentality. Zahak was not agitated, holding his sword in one hand, and slowly walked towards Morrison. Bang, bang. The flying knives exploded. Zahak did not expend his energy forcefully. He dodged sideways with extreme acumen. He predicted his trajectory by firing 3 consecutive crossbow arrows, which shot through the air toward his head. Zahak just held a sword flower, and the raindrops around him exploded, creating a vacuum in an instant. All 3 arrows shattered and broke on the ground, and the heavy rain continued to pour down. "Are these the only means?" Zahak was a little disdainful. At this time, he was about 20 meters away from Morrison. Boom! A thunder exploded, and a white flash lit up the world. Morrison was already completely close, and with a wave of his backhand, it was like electricity in the dark night. The dagger glanced at Zahak's neck, as fast as a ghost. The wind and rain are dim, like the Milky Way flowing backward. The flying trajectory of the dagger was as tricky as a snake, without any structure. Morrison was completely close, and the long sword was at a huge disadvantage. Zahak could not use this tactic. He held the long sword in reverse and quickly parried with a hilt made of black steel. In the blink of an eye, sparks burst out in hand-to-hand combat, and then disappeared in the raindrops. There was a bang. Morrison failed, and the dagger bounced off the tree, punching a hole in the spot. Zahak was about to succeed, and when he slashed back with his sword, Morrison had already disappeared from sight. I don't know when a sharp knife popped out from the front of his boots. With one hand on the ground, he violently swung his leg to kick Zahak's side from the ground. It seemed that he was exerting all his strength to the extreme, breaking through the air and sending out strong wind. If he was hit, he would be dead. Hurt. Zahak raised his eyebrows. This was actually an action that humans could perform. He immediately blocked the move with his sword and made a sharp scraping sound with the sharp knife in front of his boots. After missing a hit, Morrison used the inertia to flip back and leap forward, throwing 3 flying knives violently in the air, exploding layers of rain, making it impossible to prevent. Even Zahak only bounced off 2 of them, and the last one passed through the side of his head and cut off a strand of hair. Lightning crackled from the clouds. In an instant, it becomes daylight. Morrison's disfigured half of his face was horrifying under the electric light. He pulled out the whip blade from his waist. Under the dim light of the rainy night, the repeatedly stacked, shiny blades made his whole body feel cold, like a bloodthirsty snake. Zahak's breath was slightly disordered, but he soon stabilized, his eyes calm. Throwing knives, flicked knives on his boots. Whips, what's going on with this man? All the weapons are quite different, and the conventional equipment is also tied to the body through straps, which is extremely weird. The blood-red sword energy burst out and struck out 13 swords in an instant, each one devastating and unstoppable. Bang, bang, bang. Morrison pulled the blade of the whip and swung it violently, like dozens of white poisonous snakes biting, entangled and dancing in the air, twisting into a cutting storm. In an instant, the blood-red sword light disappeared in the clanging sound, and the surrounding rain dispersed. Crack! Morrison pulled back, and the whip blade instantly formed a circle around the armor on his arm. Incredible skills. Zahak must do whatever it takes to win. He slashed the red sword on the ground. The wind of the sword tore up the ground and spattered countless gravel and mud, which were used to block Morrison's sight. Don't wait for Zahak to come over. It's hard to imagine how much equipment Morrison carries on his body. The elbow position is like a folding fan, unfolding Senhin's chainbelt wing blades. He crosses and pulls them while swinging his hands, and the blades on the fan return all the broken stones. The knife fan in an instant, it was folded and embedded into the mechanism. Not only that, more than 20 flying knives popped out of the hem of Morrison's torn and cracked crocodile coat. As Morrison violently pulled the hem, they bloomed like peacock feathers. The flying knives of gravel, the torrential rain of pear blossoms, and the torn wind and rain penetrated Zahak. This was not enough. The armed crossbows fired continuously to push Zahak to a desperate situation. Countless fancy hidden weapons came in a chaotic and overwhelming manner, and Zahak struck with a tyrannical slash. This cut, the sword wind was like crazy, blowing away all the gravel, breaking all the flying steel, splitting it in half, and even the metal was split into 2. Zahak knew that he could not be consumed by this disfigured face, as his physical strength would be slowly worn away. Although it looks easy, this disfigured face is extremely powerful. Each hidden weapon shot is as powerful as a crossbow, and each parry consumes a huge amount of physical energy. Fortunately, the sword he used was made of scrap metal. He couldn't imagine it being mixed with magic energy like his own sword. The battle must be fought quickly. Not only here, the front line in Lavender Town must be withstood, and he must return reinforcements as soon as possible. Zahak's holy and pure white officer uniform flashed into a phantom and rushed towards him. Morrison couldn't give him this chance, so he immediately drew out the blade and whip blade. Zahak's legs were filled with wind, and he jumped quickly in the rain. The blood-red mist on his sword blade stretched into a light track, and he was ready to withstand the cutting storm. But, click! Morrison's whip blade penetrated directly into a tree. Just when Zahak was suspicious, the whip blade exploded out of the tree and unexpectedly came in a curved and tricky arc like a poisonous snake biting through. What? Zahak couldn't believe it. This move that disfigured the face was so weird that it was almost demonic. Without any experience to refer to, it was impossible to judge the direction of the attack. It was completely impossible to muster all our strength to resist this situation. However, due to his abnormal reaction ability, he forced himself to use less than half of his strength to swing his sword to block it, and he was knocked back 2 or 3 meters. Morrison pulled back the whip blade instantly. Just when Zahak thought Morrison was going to continue that weird arc of penetration, Morrison pulled out his whip and maximized his speed. In just an instant, countless crisp whip sounds exploded, and thousands of leaves fell straight from Zahak's head under the heavy rain. Compared to Zahak's splashing gravel and soil, these countless leaves instantly blinded Zahak's sight, and his hearing was also disturbed by the heavy rain. Life and death are only in an instant. Zahak closed his eyes and recalled in his mind what the Sword King once said, that the trajectory of all things can be captured through the breeze. He deflected the whip blade that fell from the sky with his backhand. Morrison had already pulled out 2 thin-edged daggers from his leg guards, holding one in each hand, and slashed down Zahak in the air while the leaves were blinding him. Zahak suddenly opened his eyes, and all his strength exploded. He held the sword in his right hand to block a slash, and pulled out the scabbard with the other hand. Taking advantage of Morrison's unpreparedness, he swung up and slashed the other dagger away, spinning wildly in the air. A ferocious smile appeared on Morrison's terrifying face, and Zahak secretly thought something was wrong. But before he could hide in time, Morrison popped out a sharp knife from his sleeve and thrust it directly into Zahak's neck. Click! Morrison retreated more than 10 meters away and stared at Zahak playfully. Zahak's neck was not injured. He dodged in time, but the cross-cut linear wound on his left face began to bleed, and then a terrifying ravine was dug out. The blood was as thick as a finger, and the red slurry was quickly covered by the heavy rain. It was washed away, leaving only the split flesh, leaving a permanent mark. Morrison is not in a hurry. It is raining heavily now. As long as Zahak is not let back, no one can be the opponent of the strange shark. He alone is an army. How do you make ends meet with your level of skill? Morrison put the hidden sword in the air, letting the raindrops wipe away the blood, and then put it back. He humiliated Zahak and adjusted his mentality. In fact, Zahak, if it had been anyone else, would have died 100 times due to Morrison's tricky killing moves. Zahak remained unfazed. It's just each other. Your acrobatics are not bad. Zahak sheathed his sword and took a stance to draw it. Morrison was noncommittal. The so-called apprentice of the Sword King of Aram, Lieutenant General of the Military Police, has 2 brushes to bring to the table. But that's all. In that case, then, let's show some real character. Boom! A thunderbolt exploded on the horizon, and the wind became even fiercer and the rainstorm came heavily. Unparalleled murderous intent struck, and the omen of imminent death seemed to cast some spell that penetrated the soul. Extreme fear ran straight through his mind, but there was no wave of spell power. It's just an extremely fierce, murderous intention that is spreading wildly. Zahak froze for a moment, finally understanding the reason why the war horse lost control, and he forced himself to calm down. You have to take it. I'm going to kill you within 10 seconds. Morrison said a word. That's skill. On the main road from Lavender Town to Megong. The fighting shook the sky. Life is just a unit here, and all emotions have been wiped out. Except greed and rage. A one-eyed pirate who was blind in one eye and had a cloudy blue iris. His eyes were so cruel that he looked like a cold-blooded creature. He inserted a scimitar into the neck of a sergeant and twisted it several times. He tore off the head and tore off the armband. 2 golden dragons were already there. Got it. A few seconds on the line of life and death, in exchange for nearly 4 years of income for an ordinary sailor in the Navy. The military police in the interior of Aram are elite, but most of them have only dealt with gangsters and gangsters in the Empire. I have never seen a desperado on the coast, licking blood from his knife and almost going crazy. Extremely barbaric. He clapped his mouth and imitated the cannibal tribe's cruel howl. The battle situation between Colonel Piapan and Oaks was anxious, but it was obvious that they were slowly declining and their morale was on the verge of collapse. Never lose. Piapan was still resisting, and the extra-large knife struck Oaks like crazy. Each knife was so powerful and heavy that it could turn a cow into meat. Oaks calmly blocked them all, and thick smoke evaporated from the blades of their weapons under the raindrops. almost turning into high-temperature soldering irons in the intense confrontation. At this time, Piapan's attention was entirely on Oaks. The rest of the people did not dare to get close to the battle between the two and would die if they bumped into each other. Only one person took advantage of the opportunity. Ren flew over from the darkness with great insidiousness, scratched Piapan's ankle with his claws, and severed his hamstring with another claw. The moment Piapan's left foot completely lost strength and became unbalanced. In an instant, life and death are decided. Boom! With an extremely violent blow, Oaks slashed away the large sword with one strike, leaped into the air, and grabbed Piapan's weapon. The extra-large sword weighing 300 pounds in his left hand and the extra-large sword weighing 300 pounds in his right hand are like the gods of death. Piapan's face was ashen. Oaks took 2 steps forward and started. Dual-wielding flurry. The light and shadow of the sword swayed, and the 2 weapons were as light as foam boards and slashed wildly. The strong wind blew away all the raindrops in a radius of about 20 meters, and the sound of the flesh, muscles, and bones exploding was endless. As Oak stopped, Imperial Arena, monthly runner-up, became. The scattered pieces of meat fell to the ground and turned into a puddle of broth. At this point, the battle situation has been decided. BlackSail's pirates killed about 20 people, but after Oaks chopped off Piapan, the already low morale of the military police completely collapsed, and it took less than a minute. They were all killed by the pirates, leaving no one alive. They had already begun to collect trophies. 1 ear of a military policeman was worth 100 silver coins, and a pair of ears was worth a golden dragon. Non-commissioned officers needed to wear armbands on their heads. The 2 of us working together are really powerful. Ren saw that the main force on this road had been cleared, so he opened the champagne in advance and waited for Lee's sight to bring his people back. The rain would slow down the speed a little, but it was harmless. After going to sea, he would also have a taste of heroic adventure. The taste of home. Oaks was silent, his poker face showing no joy. If it hadn't been for the heavy rain, the leopard man in that state might have died. I don't know what the situation is like in Zahak. Seeing that the situation was decided, Oaks scanned the surrounding jungle. He didn't know where Morrison had gone and was unable to provide support. Brother Shah. Should he be dead? Although Ren said that he could kill him in seconds, he was still a little unsure. Although Morrison could kill him in seconds, he had never met someone like Zahak. That was the Sword King's apprentice, Lieutenant General Allen. Oaks was speechless, but Ren knew how to speak auspicious words. At the same time, a flat land deep in a dense forest. The first second, it's already started, with a flash of thunder and lightning. Morrison was nowhere to be seen. That skill was beyond Zahak's understanding and completely beyond his cognition. Rather, he has been under Morrison for so long and has become a rare breed. The sharp knife and dagger on the boots were used together, and in less than a second, like a flash of light, they reached the top of the tree more than 10 meters high, leaping between the trees. Silver snakes descend from the sky, and whip blades dance swiftly. The blades poured down like free lightning, drawing, twisting, and piercing each other. It was faster and more violent than the downpour. Zahak drew his sword and blocked it wildly, slashing out more than 10 swords in 1 second. He also fell into some kind of madness, and the sparks splashed out and lit up the surrounding area into daylight. Too slow, too slow. How dare you come out and mess around if you were so slow? Morrison continues to increase the intensity. This is just the beginning. This is far from the end. Sharp, tearing, and piercing, like a hell torture chamber intertwined with infinite blades rushing from Hades to the world. Zahak's reaction speed has reached a critical value. Morrison can still be faster and harder. Click, a bloody trace was drawn from Zahak's arm. Click, a gash opened in his leg, and he had no time to face such a violent attack. Bang, bang, bang. Several more flying knives were fired in succession, so powerful that they exploded on the ground like cannonballs. Zahak couldn't dodge, and just the force of the flying knife cut open the clothes on his arms, causing the flesh to rip apart and bleed. Watching Morrison slowly fall from the sky. Die! Zahak put his palm on the blade, watered the magic blade with some of his own blood, and then slashed towards the top of his head with sword energy. The branches were broken, and the sword wind broke all the shrubs within a radius of tens of meters. Morrison dodged the blow without any pressure. The whip blade had already hooked on the tree on the other side. The whole person was strangled from the tree like a rotating blade, and it took an arc from the air in less than a second. He flew to the ground and jumped into the air with 2 steps of inertia. Not only the dagger, but also his whole body flashed over like light. Zahak was already a little stunned by the speed. It was completely a subconscious conditioned reflex. Raise your sword to block. He was immediately knocked back a few meters, but Morrison was like a ghost following the wind. The wing blades of his elbow joints unfolded, and he slashed wildly with the dagger while swinging the wing blades and tapping the crossbow. The extremely tricky and cunning killing move hits the vital point every time, and dozens of attacks are executed every moment. Like a terrifying life that evolved solely for killing. A sword, even Lieutenant General Allen. How could he block it? Click, click, click. Zahak only blocked the fatal attack, but there were more than a dozen wounds on his body. Bleeding continued, and a crossbow arrow was shot in his shoulder. Morrison whipped his whip blade, exploding 2 nearby large trees. The arc was extremely tricky, and they collapsed in a cross shape towards the location where the two were fighting. Zahak has been completely entangled by Morrison, and his movements are restricted. It looked like the big tree was about to hit both of them. Morrison's strange skill was to climb sideways under a fallen tree and leap into the air. Zahak also wanted to get away, but Morrison no longer held back. There were still 16 flying knives left on the belt, and he fired 2 rounds to block Zahak's movement. The big tree fell directly towards Zahak. His physical energy was almost exhausted, but he still split the trees with 1 slash. But Morrison is already there. He couldn't avoid it. Click! Although the thin-edged dagger did not kill him, it still penetrated Zahak's shoulder, dragged him on the ground for more than 10 meters, and nailed him to a tree. Morrison whipped the whip and immediately disarmed him. The strange red blade and the scabbard were pulled back by the whip, allowing him to hold it in his hand. Zahak, defeated. He sat paralyzed and was nailed to the tree. His throat felt sweet, and he vomited a mouthful of blood. It rained heavily. Morrison was unscathed. With your skills, why do you become a pirate? Serving the Emperor, even if you join the Imperial Knights, it is more than enough. Zahak couldn't understand that this was a big defeat, not an unjust defeat, and he had to reach his teacher's level before he could fight him. Morrison sneered twice. Being an official in Aram means you will die. Morrison said casually, "Let's do it." Zahak stared at Morrison coldly, without any fear of death. Anyway, he would be a useless person when he returned to Yalin. As you wish. Morrison was about to try a new weapon. Woolman's cabin was very insightful. He had to keep up with the times. He rotated the mechanism on his arm, and 5 small black muzzles were revealed. Without hesitation, he aimed at Zahak's head and tapped the mechanism. However, nothing happened. Perhaps because of the rain, Morrison shook off the accumulated water, then tapped Zahak's head once more, but the fire was still muted. Morrison pointed sideways. Boom! 5 pellets were fired successfully, punching several small holes in a tree. But Morrison was determined to kill. Wielding the red sword, he attempted to behead him. The whistle sounded. Only one could blow it so loudly. For more than 2 seconds, Zahak's team was all killed. Morrison was silent for a moment. You are a tough-minded person, so I will accept this sword. See you later. Morrison sheathed his sword and walked away. Zahak was left seriously injured and unable to move. Brother Shah, you can go on your way with peace of mind. You didn't mention where your hometown is, so I will accept your share of the money and have a good trip. Wren believed that Morrison had hung up and had not returned after sending a signal for so long. Although the person is dead, it doesn't matter. Zahak has also been exhausted to some extent. If he dares to come back here again, he and Oaks will not suffer the consequences of him. 1,002 golden dragons and less than 1 cent. Take off. Wren was still wary of his surroundings, and Oaks had been laying down his weapon for a while. There are auspicious words again today. Morrison slowly appeared on the road, holding Zahak's sword. The sword was extremely cool, and blood-red light mist gushed out from the gaps in the scabbard. Rin turned around and stared at Morrison as if he had seen a ghost. Then he looked at the sword in his hand and was shocked. Zahak already. Rin guessed the result. He was worthy of killing the general. He killed the heir in seconds and seconds. The predator was generally called the little killing brother. Oaks did not speak. He saw that Morrison was not injured at all and could still be so calm against a person of that level. This was not the case before. There were large objects on the ship, and he had to be more careful. It no longer poses any threat. Morrison spoke calmly. It's harmful. I knew a long time ago. It's going to be a matter of seconds. What's there to say? Rin completely relaxed, and by now the main force of the Aran military police had been eliminated. Morrison glanced around the battlefield. Almost 20 of BlackSail's men were dead. Considering that the opponent was a regular Aram army, this was considered a big victory. However, in the anxious battle situation, Rin killed all the horses. How to deal with Lee Sight and the others now? The people on Fun's side are facing the Holy See. They have to go back to support them. Lee Sight and the others haven't come yet, so they still need people to check on the situation. Oaks was making a decision. Although Zahak was dead, the matter was not over yet. The matter would not come to an end until the people got on the boat and went to sea without any pursuit. After a while, Oaks made a decision and asked the fast-footed run to go find Lee Sight and the others. He and Morrison had to save the ship. Don't wait for Oaks to call the shots. At this time, a pirate found a horse still alive in the woods. Morrison immediately suggested that he ride a horse to find Lee Sight and the others. On the road, with heavy rain, the atmosphere suddenly became tense. Oaks did not reply immediately. He tied the extra-large sword to the strap on his back and pressed it with an iron buckle. He held the extra-large sword in his hand. He was worried that Morrison would never come back. Morrison was familiar with Tiongwa Port and knew which area of Tiongwa Port BlackSail had occupied as a stronghold. He also knew the origins of all the backbones. With his ability and the help of a few good players, it would be difficult to save the big items on the ship. The remaining 60 or so pirates have already collected the trophies and used them as dividend notes. 7 or 8 seconds have passed. Oaks was still considering it. At this time, they were hunting horseshoes in the distance, and everyone was immediately prepared. It was not just a few people, but a column of about 30 people stepping over from the rain curtain. It's okay. It's the captain, and they are back. Rin's eyesight was very good. Although it was impossible to distinguish the outline of the face at such a distance on a rainy night, the hat Xia was wearing should not be too eye-catching. The smell of swordsman was too strong. Rin didn't understand what swordsman meant, so he just rushed. Not to mention Lee Sight, Oaks and Rin were standing there. It was difficult to find this combination except BlackSail. Lee Sight took the lead and came over on horseback. He looked at the corpses lying on the ground. What a good guy. He is both a human and a horse. From now on, Gowdy will be a geomantic treasure for building a school. Has anyone received it? Oaks went straight to the point. It's okay if you didn't catch it. It's the one wrapped in black robe. Lee Sight ran from Lavender Town to Wine Breeze Canyon that day and had to climb mountains and ridges for dozens of miles. It was another fierce battle, coupled with the bumpy riding in bad weather. He was so tired that he was about to vomit blood. The rest of the people are miserable. Caruso is worthy of being a demon in the Holy See. He is extremely tired, and his eyes are starting to become blurry. However, he just relies on his demonic will to maintain a trace of energy. The Holy Spirit teaches Superman that it is. The seriously injured Gloria was also carried on Swan's horse, because Swan was the lightest. At this time, her lips had completely lost the color of her blood, and her breath was as thin as a thread. The two guards could no longer be called fighting strength, and the strength of the others was also greatly reduced. The three Oaks looked at the mysterious man. Because of the heavy rain, the robe was soaked. Judging from a skeleton, she should be a woman of 16 or 17 years old. In addition, under the outline of the rain, the truth was evident. A generous gift crab. Ren had no idea that Micah was such a beautiful girl with big breasts. Now I have to use a crab net. Morrison made explosive remarks. Holy shit, these gendarmes have been killed by you guys. Where's Zahak? Xiadi asked as he circled the horse, looking at the mess on the ground. What the hell, Zahak? Brother Shah was instantly killed. It's just a trivial matter. Ren saw that people had been received, the main force had been killed, and the large army had returned. The rest was just a small problem. You can't say it's trivial, it's just moderate. Morrison spoke calmly. Li Sight was greatly shocked. He was worthy of being the invincible brother killer. He had already taken care of all the disciples of the Sword King, Lieutenant General of the military police. Not to mention killing aliens, he was as good as Godzilla. Besides, you really know how to show off. These must be Caruso and Gloria. I found something on this team of military police, and I want to talk to you alone. Oak's face was expressionless, and he had already started to kill Caruso and Gloria, who happened to be extremely weak now. Li Sight nodded. Caruso watched the two people leave closely. They stood on the roadside in the distance, and the sound of their conversation was washed away by the heavy rain. Whether it was this werewolf, a mermaid, or a disfigured face, they all exuded an extremely dangerous aura. Not to mention the group of pirates behind who were cleaning up the battlefield, searching for chainmail and weapons, and trying their luck at looking at corpses. There was no money, scary sneers, and vulgar conversations that were unbearable. These terrifying signals forced Caruso's extremely tired head to regain some energy. This matter was too urgent and special. The Count had no choice but to make a plan to find the pirates. It was a risky move with too many uncertain factors. 2 minutes later, Oakes and Li Sight had reached an agreement and walked back from the roadside. Oakes gave up the idea for the time being. Damn, there are people from the Holy See on the shore. Li Sight realized that he had to rush back immediately. If the ship disappeared, it would be completely over. The words Edmund said before he died were still in his ears. Just like the fucking Thieves Guild, the Gendarmerie Guards are also determined to fight to the death. It is estimated that they are now being targeted by both the black and white groups in Aram, so it is a mixed doubles fight. If they were trapped on the East Coast and Allen sent out his pursuers and started to increase their intensity, his pirate group would be killed without any suspense. He decided not to do this. It's urgent to get back to Secret Harbor in the shortest possible time. Li Sight got on his horse. At the most critical moment, he could only rely on general fun. Heavenly Kingdom Harbor was the place where he could take shelter from the wind. Follow Li Sight's instructions and come down. Most of BlackSail's combat forces returned to Secret Harbor for reinforcements. There is only one final step left, and we are about to sail into the sea. Secret Harbor, inside the Sea Cliff Cave. The wind and rain were swaying, and the rain formed thin lines and made infinitely violent ripples on the sea. Marcus, the priest of the Aramaic Church, was not without wisdom. Under the petition umbrella tree, the dragon of eternity and time has long given guidance. But Marcus didn't rush around. In Aram, the Pope and the Emperor were at odds. Politics does not mean that hostile relations are about life and death. Every step must be strategized and requires out-of-the-box thinking. Since you can't eliminate your influence, you should use it to your advantage. National affairs are important. In places where Aram did not have complete control, missionaries were sent as the vanguard. They first instilled a subtle influence on their thoughts and formed a cognitive community, and then slowly integrated into the cultural circle of Aram and became an available population resource. Although today, the Principality of Bima and Aram have a sworn hatred. However, religion has a strong social service nature. The poorer and more suffering the place, the more a set of logic is needed to explain the phenomenon. The reason why the old king was defeated so miserably and left the common people with no good life was because he disobeyed the Dragon Lord. As long as he believed in the Dragon Lord, everything would be fine. It sounds ridiculous, but a whole generation has been killed in Bima, and too many war widows have been turned into prostitutes. The remaining young adults also had to embark on the ruthless Golden Belt Road, and they were conquered even if the wind tightened. How could you believe in the enemy's religion? But this is indeed the case. just like an atomic bomb dropped from the sky. No matter how atheistic a person is, they will long for such a being to suddenly appear and save the people, let alone the already superstitious Western continent. Poverty, famine, and banditry are the atomic bombs that fell on the Principality of Bhima. The Lord of Eternity and Time is an existence that can be desired, and the country that desires this god has a rich country and a strong people, and the proof is as solid as a mountain. Fighting openly and secretly with Bayanwawa, the Dragon Lord will give you a home. Even on the East Coast, there are churches, congregations, and defenders of the eternal sect. This is the hard power of the religion in the Western continent. Marcus is far from the person whose brain was burned by the sect, as Zahak imagined. He understands the current situation and what this matter means to Alan. In this foreign country, there are constraints everywhere, and few of the soldiers borrowed from the admiral are actually there to support them. They're just a formality, and they don't even have to think about running away when encountering a tough battle. The only thing that is truly reliable is people of the Dragon of Eternity and Time. Micah on the boat looked at the people on the shore, his eyelids twitching wildly. Fuck you. Micah didn't know what else to use to express his current state of mind, except these 4 words. Hundreds of torches illuminate the entire cave. The mentally retarded giant, who was more than 5 meters tall, was holding a large oil drum and smashed it heavily on the ground. This oil barrel is filled with cloth strips, and the effect is self-evident. Zahak had previously sent out 100 military policemen to support them. They had bows and arrows in their hands. They wrapped the arrows in cloth strips and lit them on torches. There are also 200 defenders that Marcus transferred from the surrounding areas of Linden City. Although their equipment is not sophisticated enough, and they only wear cloth and leather armor, they're also devilish. The emotion in their eyes is a kind of unimaginable madness. They also held rockets. In addition, there are more than 20 priests brought by Marcus from the territory of Aram. The cold black heavy plate armor is a bit bloated. The black iron dragon mask only exposes 2 holes for the eyes. It was as dark as an abyss. And Marcus himself, with dry hair, a metal chin, a masochistic face covered with scratches, wearing chainmail, holding a scripture in his hand, standing on the shore with one hand behind his back. An extremely terrifying pressure came. Even Fun, who had always been calm and composed, felt as if he was facing a formidable enemy. A drop of sweat broke out on his forehead, and he couldn't help but look at the fragments of the steel containing the magic sealing stone in his arms. Maybe I can only use this thing as a medium, but I will definitely suffer backlash, and maybe I will die. Is it time to test your own measurability? Fortunately, it is. Marcus had no intention of taking action and just stood still. Although Finn didn't know what tricks he was going to play, the longer the delay was, the better. He knew the abilities of the others in BlackSail and would definitely come back to help. Marcus could have attacked immediately, but he had concerns. The Dragon Lord appears. It's not that it never happens, but it happens very rarely, and every time it is an important point of difference that affects the direction of the entire world. Even when the Disaster Witch was rescued from prison, the Dragon Lord did not give any instructions. It's because of something else. Someone on this ship, or something metaphysical. The fate of this ship is crucial. This made Marcus afraid to act rashly, protecting some surprisingly fragile items. We would like to board the ship for inspection. Please be accommodating. His voice was extremely hoarse, perhaps because of the metal jaw. Fun adheres to the principle of procrastinating as much as possible and doesn't mind chatting for a while. This is a private ship. The captain is not here. You can wait half an hour and he will be back. Fun calmed down and already had a strategy. This group of people had been hanging around inland for a long time and didn't know the dangers of the coast. Although Marcus ordered people to raise rockets, he currently has no intention of burning the ship. In that case, the things would be destroyed and sink into the sea, swept away by the undercurrent, and disappear without a trace. But he had to give Fun a little show of strength. He called out the name of the 5-meter-tall dementia giant. Next scene. Micah is scared to death. How can he withstand this? Everyone, Wallman, hold on to the mast. Finn shouted. "It doesn't matter even if the upper half of the hull is smashed. There are materials in the warehouse, and Haywood can repair it. The lower half of the hull cannot be taken care of. The mast is the most important. If it is smashed, everyone will be trapped here." The demented giant forcibly lifted a large stone weighing about 2 tons from the ground. The formation was as scary as possible. He picked up the huge rock and then slammed it towards the ship. It flew nearly 100 meters away in a terrifying parabola and exploded towards a mast. Finn quickly pulled out the magic thread, forming a giant net, tearing the oncoming giant rock into more than a dozen pieces of rubble, and the power was dispersed. But it still penetrated part of the hull, and a huge explosion penetrated the hull. The ship's railing was also shattered, and sawdust flew wildly. One of the rounds weighed hundreds of kilograms of gravel and was about to hit the mast. Woolman's tall body stretched out his hand to block it, but his arm was shaking and blood was oozing out. Finn knew that Marcus was about to get serious. "You guys from the interior, your brains are already rusty." Finn pressed his monocle. "When it comes to who is the strongest in the BlackSail pirates, it is not me or Morrison. Indisputable. The Fermat King's revenge. Now it is aimed at the shore with a T-shaped advantage." Following Finn's command, there were 36 reinforced cannons on board, 18 on one side. At this time, the wooden planks on the hull to prevent the ship's guns from being corroded by seawater and rain were turned over, revealing 18 terrifying cannons. Marcus' eyelids twitched. As the anti-corrosion door of the naval gun was opened, the pirates on the ship used all their strength to push the wooden loader roller under the cannon, allowing the barrel to approach the side. There are 32-pound heavy guns, with a terrifying caliber of 15.9 centimeters, and are completely black. There are 18 guns in total. This is not some pirate product. It was the boss of Tianguo Port who shot up a sailing battleship owned by the governor of the East Coast and unloaded the official cargo. Lee Sight bought it with a lot of blood in Tianguo Port. Compared with the cannons that other pirates pulled from nowhere, Fuma Cushing's the firepower is almost at the two-way foil level, which can be called a dimensionality reduction strike. Marcus was blind and relied entirely on his magic power to sense his surroundings. He had already noticed the extreme panic of the military police. However, the believers transferred from around Linden City did not seem to be very firm in their faith, and a small number of them had the intention of retreating. Those who don't know how to do are still looking for cover, but those who know how to do it have already begun to pray. Besides, this sea cave is basically an eroded cliff. It is completely hollow, and there is no place to hide. The heavy artillery wall can be smashed, let alone these sea rocks with extremely poor texture. Today's artillery shells in the Western continent are roughly divided into 3 categories: solid shells, shotgun shells, and chain shells. Although there are also hollow explosive bombs filled with gunpowder, due to the immature impact fuse technology, 7 or 8 out of 10 firebombs are misfires, and the BlackSail pirates never use them. The power of the above 3 types of shells alone is terrifying enough. Needless to say, the solid bullets are much stronger than the trebuchets. If one hits them, they will be completely destroyed, if not broken into pieces. Chain bullets are 2 solid bullets set together with a chain. The purpose is to increase the killing range and be used to destroy masts and sails. There's also a kind of shotgun. In short, it is a thick iron bucket containing dozens or hundreds of small lead bullets. The iron bucket will explode when it comes out of the chamber, and the projectiles inside will explode in a fan-shaped range. The effect is naturally specifically used to kill people. Morrison's position as gunnery commander was a sinecure, even more idle than Woolman's warehouse manager. He could fish 30 or 29 days a month, but he did a pretty good job, and the 18 naval guns were in excellent condition and ready to fire at any time. When Finn heard the news, he had already had shotgun loaded. Emission, as Finn yelled, 18 heavy cannons fired a salvo, and the cave, which was already echoing, made a loud sound, as if 18 thunderbolts had exploded here. The iron barrels blasted from the barrels exploded and covered the entire area in a fan shape. Coastal. It is difficult to describe the scene at this moment and the lethality. To put it bluntly, it was like a volley of 2,000 musketeers, and the power was increased 10 times. The defenders of the Eternal Sect and the elite military police brought by Marcus had no time to fire the rockets in their hands. These small lead bullets are also extremely powerful and can penetrate several people without stopping. Nearly 2,000 rounds of lead shot exploded on the coast. All this happens in 2 seconds. About 200 people on the spot were cut into limp, rotten flesh by the overwhelming barrage. The blood in their bodies didn't seem to have been beaten out, but squeezed out. The sound of tearing flesh and blood exploded throughout the cave into scarlet blood mist. It was a blood mist in the true sense, floating in the wind, and then immediately sprinkled into a rain of blood and watered the ground. Dozens of drops of blood spattered on Fun's robe, and 2 drops were also splashed on his glasses. From that cold-blooded and surly face, it was impossible to tell that he had once been a scholar. More than 200 people were slaughtered in an instant. The remaining people were more or less shot, but they were not completely dead. They kept screaming on the ground. Only about 60 or 70 people were shot in the limbs, and there were also scratches, but I can barely move. The demented giant was so big that he became a live target. At least dozens of lead bullets were fired into his body. He was covered in blood like a sieve, and he knelt on the ground and howled in pain. The process of loading and firing a heavy artillery is very cumbersome. Far from loading it into the barrel and firing it directly, factors such as extinguishing residual sparks and compacting the shells with a ramming rod must be taken into consideration. Even a well-trained Royal Navy needs to do it as quickly as possible. It took a minute to get it done. Finn didn't expect these pirates to have that kind of speed, but it would take at least a minute and a half. Load the chain bombs and launch. Woolman, Haywood, and everyone on the deck must prevent the remaining people from getting on the ship. No matter what, it must be delayed for 90 seconds. Finn was also worried about Marcus and the 20 or so priests. These priests were all wearing overweight plate armor several centimeters thick. Even in the battle just now, they were all strong, except for some dents on the top of the heavy armor. Weird thing is, Marcus seemed to be blessed with some kind of luck. He never moved a step away, but he didn't get shot once. All rockets fired. Marcus held the scripture in his hand. Even if 2/3 of the people were instantly destroyed, he did not get angry at all. His psychological quality was so strong that he could be called a devil. The remaining military policemen saw that their psychological defenses had collapsed when they saw this hell on Earth, but the leather-armored defenders dispatched by Marcus only calmed down for a moment. Their crazy mentality was no joke, and the bows and arrows in their hands were still intact. Those who could use them set up rockets and shot them towards the ship. Fun sneered. Pedon National Arcane Academy is the mainstay in the fight against religious forces. In the Warlock Council Tower Alliance, Pedon alone accounts for almost 1/5 of the seats. As the top all-round talent in the Pedon Kingdom, Finn has rich experience in when to use which technique. He is even one of the editors of the General University textbook, Warlock Battlefield Literacy. This book is still being printed and published today and is used by the Pedon National Arcane Academy, but a certain person's name has been crossed out. Finn was supposed to have the palace painter trace it into an oil painting and hang it in the corridor of the teaching building for people to admire, but in the end it came to this point. Elemental magic is undoubtedly the simplest magic. There are 2 levels of difficulty: casting magic through magic materials and casting magic by oneself. The former is the lowest level and can often only generate quite limited elements and consumes a lot of concentration. It's just that Finn calls it concentration, and there are countless ways to say it in the Western continent with countless systems. Once you reach the latter, you can enter the palace. For fun, everything has a fundamental starting point, just like there are hidden and invisible strings. As long as these strings are plucked, everything can start from deeper dimensions affect the present world, and there are endless mysteries. Finn does not need to recite prayers like Caruso, nor does he actually perform magic by himself. Instead, he uses all the strings existing in natural elements as a medium, and during the plucking, he can tune part of nature. There was a violent storm outside the cave. 70 or 80 arrows soaked in oilcloth and burning with flames were shot towards the ship. Finn just raised his hands in the air to give himself a psychological hint, and his concentration was infinite. In an instant, more than a dozen invisible blades came from outside the cave. Just a gust of wind passed by. Before all the arrows hit, they were completely split and shattered in midair. The remaining power still penetrated several people, and a burst of blood and flesh was blurred. Marcus was thinking clearly, and when they reloaded, it was all over. Everyone is heading towards the trestle. As soon as they get under the boat, they have no other options at their disposal. Following Marcus's order, the heavily armed priest moved quickly without any clumsiness, carrying a mace. Finn couldn't let these guys get close to them under any circumstances, even at the risk of destroying the trestle. When Lee's sight and the others came back, they would only need to put down the boat to respond or swim over and cast down a rope net. Several more wind blades blasted past, and the wooden planks on the T-shaped trestle cracked and exploded into sawdust, creating a gap of more than 4 meters long. There is no way to jump over these heavily armored priests. Marcus recited the prayer silently and saw branches sprouting from the broken place of the trestle at a speed visible to the naked eye. Then countless thick vines sprouted out, and a vine bridge was built forcibly. Fun, whose face was covered with blood, frowned. Since he is a priest of the eternal sect, it is not unusual for him to know some magic. Woolman jumped off the trestle with a giant battle axe. Since he was a fucking Aramine, it was useful to kill a few big guys, so it didn't matter if he died here. He rushed forward and faced 20 priests in multiple armors. He held the battle axe behind his back and smashed a man's helmet with the heavy iron block behind him. Boom, boom, boom. Woolman's violent blows were like a sudden storm, denting more than half of the dragon's face that was several centimeters thick. It stands to reason that his head would have been squeezed inside and exploded. Marcus sneered. These priests have been blessed by the miracle of the Dragon Lord. As long as there are enough parts left to support body movements, they can still fight if their heads explode. Their heavy armor also has the special power of magic pattern construction. The priests from the Yalin headquarters are not just soldiers. Boom! The priest, whose chest was half-dented, hit Woolman's waist with a mace, shattering the scales that could withstand gold and iron, and oozing out bright red blood. The other priests did not just watch from the sidelines. They came around one after another. Some used maces and some used flails to greet Woolman. The armor was broken frequently, and Woolman was covered in blood, but he still managed to withstand it. Fuck you. Woolman swung the axe with all his strength and immediately bounced away several priests. The combat prowess of these demons is unbelievable when singled out, let alone more than 20 of them together. Woolman also went crazy and threw down the long-handled axe. His hands were empty. At this time, a priest came with a mace. Woolman squeezed his wrist hard and then pressed it with his other hand. Priest's shoulders. These heavy iron plate armors are extremely well defended and airtight. Since they cannot be destroyed from the outside, what about the inside? That scene was too cruel and barbaric. Woolman grabbed the man's hand and tore the shoulder blades alive. All the muscles were also broken, and along with the relatively fragile connection, he tore off the entire hand and the arm armor. Woolman violently used this customized flail and began to whip the other priest, knocking off his mace. Then he still gave up the weapon and pushed him to the ground with a pounce. Pressed down with a terrifying weight and pressed his head directly with both hands. It turns out, he picked it off and threw it at a priest like a cannonball, knocking him into the water. With the weight of the plate armor, he could only drown to death. Finally, 2 people were reduced. Even so, it was difficult for 2 fists to defeat 4 hands. No priest was easy to deal with, and they all gathered together. Haywood couldn't sit still anymore. The backbone of the ship had always regarded him as a tool. In fact, he was not useless. It was just that they were relatively stronger, and he still had some use. Haywood also jumped from the side of the boat and took off his helmet. Master Haywood is going to fight too. Woolman knew that Haywood's identity could not be revealed to the public. As long as they are all dead and there are no witnesses, isn't it the end? Haywood had black goat horns on his head, blood-red skin, and then 3 pairs of eyes. Each eye was a strange golden color, and a pair of insect-like mouth parts at the corners of his mouth. Grinning the mouth has 2 rows of teeth that look like saws. Not only the priests, but also Marcus was stunned. Could it be that the Dragon Master's guidance was this creature? Whether it is the Western continent or anywhere else, it is unheard of, but it is very similar to the devil recorded in the evil books. Haywood lunged at a priest without using any weapon. Marcus originally wanted to capture him alive, but now was not the time, so he had no choice but to let the priest kill him and take the body back with him. The priest's mace struck Haywood in the neck. However, the scene was too weird. Although Haywood is a low-level demon, he is also a real demon. I saw that his belly and chest were completely torn apart, forming an extremely horrifying mouth with dozens of rows of fangs that were so dense that it was terrifying, and there was a bone spur sticking out from the center. What should I do? How scary. Haywood looked directly at the top of the priest's head. The big mouth with a split chest and abdomen completely submerged his head. His teeth were chewing frantically, but this had no effect on the protective armor. Only the priest himself knew what had happened to him. The bone spurs in the center of the big mouth grew crazily, piercing the 2 holes that Lomian Duman used to see, and then penetrated into his neck and surged in his internal organs. Haywood did not stop until the priest was completely incapacitated. Boom! One of Haywood's arms was directly broken by the flail, but not a drop of blood came out, and the hand was just scattered into red sand. He blocked the fracture in his shoulder and took several steps back. He was still too reluctant. If his boss, the Master Chief, were here, how could these guys be so presumptuous and drink them in less than a few seconds? But after so many years, they must have marched to further places, leaving only themselves in this untrodden land. Pastor number 20 is very fierce. There were dozens of mobile military police and moral defenders behind. At this time, they were all rushing towards the ship. They saw that the chain ammunition was about to be loaded, but there was not enough time to adjust the horizontal shooting angle at such a close distance, and there would be accidental injuries. Finn had to start using necromancy. It was still the same scene as before. A phantom of him slowly walked out beside Fun, but this phantom was completely purple mist. As soon as he walked out, it turned into a burst of purple mist. This purple mist seemed to be alive and quickly submerged the bodies of all the dead on the shore. Because the number to be controlled almost reached the critical value, Finn began to bleed black from his nose, and his concentration was rapidly being depleted. I saw more than 200 people who had turned into rotten flesh and bones getting up from the ground. Black flesh and blood sprouted from the missing parts. Their eyes were completely purple. They could no longer distinguish between friend and foe and rushed over to kill everyone they saw. As if their physical strength had been blessed by secret power, they went riot, biting their former allies with their teeth. Some of them still retained their instincts in life and could still swing weapons. What's the situation? A military policeman turned around and was frightened. He was immediately bitten in the neck by a resurrected corpse and spurted blood. The morale of the remaining people was completely shattered. Necromancy, seeing that the situation was about to reverse, Marcus quickly called out the giant's name. At this time, the injured and demented giant also stood up again, murmuring in words that could not be called words, and his vitality was beyond imagination. This giant is still so exaggerated. There were several semi-scrapped ships parked in the secret port. The giant roared and climbed on board the ship, breaking off a 10-meter-long wooden board along with the metal of the ship's side guardrails to use as a weapon, and swept them wildly at the army of resurrected corpses. At this moment, Archer, who is outside the secret port, doesn't even dare to come in. It's so scary. Then Archer heard the sound of horse hooves. It's Lee's sight and the others who are back.